What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere. There's also a PayPal and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly though, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Unorthodox, Adam Meakin, The Plain Truth, Sleeping Warrior, Mark Doxy, Chocolate Sayin, Arwin, and Jeff. How are you all doing?
Not Jeff. Alan.
Good. Alan B, aka Jeff.
What's up, Choco? My trousers are a bit tight.
Hey, Jeff.
Anyway, let's talk about the flat Earth. And
but wait a minute, Alan B, you really gonna deny that was you?
We'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. We've got to keep house. We haven't kept house today. Any signs of curvature,
I can confirm
gentlemen?
My name is not Jeff.
Any signs of curvature, gentlemen?
Who?
Any signs of curvature?
Nope.
Soundly's new video.
Oh,
you guys saw that, right?
Nope. Tell us all about it.
Why would any of us see Soundly's new video? Come on.
Well, he had some guy GPS position the bridge, and they mapped it all out, and CAD software did three-dimensional points and overlaid that with the pictures that you guys said are fake. So they have two different corroborating pieces of evidence showing that it actually is curved.
Yeah, so satellite GPS works on WGS84, a geoid overlay that sits on top of it's a bit like a sheet or a cloth that you put on top of a table. But if you put that tablecloth that's on a flat table, and if you put it on something that's ever so slightly curved, your table now is curved according to the tablecloth. But if you map that GPS stuff out, you can put it over any shape you want, and you believe it's any shape you want because it'll always comply to the shape. In other words, it proves nothing.
No.
I don't think you believe that, Tony.
No, if you put... Right, so I guess you didn't understand the point I made then, guys. If you're going to put a tablecloth...
I just don't think you believe it.
Then your tablecloth will tell you, if you pinpoint all these dots in it and like a Hessian sack over it and all the grid lines and all that, it'll be flat. But then that same flat table, you can wrap around an ever so slightly gradients, like we'll call a ball. But if you tell it that it's flat, that overlay will always present itself as flat because that's what you've programmed it to do, and that's all GPS does. It's an overlay.
That table got a tuft of trees on it.
Nah.
Tippy tops.
I still don't know what you're talking about. So what's he actually showing?
Any ice creams?
Who said ice cream?
Curvature.
Soundly, you didn't see his video? He did a live stream the other day where he, like I said, he mapped out the bridge with three-dimensional points in space, and then they made a map of that in CAD, and they lined it up perfectly with his pictures to show that the pictures weren't.
Are there any ends?
Worked anyway.
He's extremely skilled, Soundly, isn't he?
Just tell me what was you saying? You can see Earth curve in it. I haven't heard any Earth curve bits. I've heard mapping it in CAD and mapping what? What are we actually looking at? What are you talking about?
I would figure that was implied. I mean, I guess maybe for the people who are watching who don't know, Soundly is famous for having photographed the curvature of the Earth using Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, which is like 26 miles long over a spread of water in Louisiana.
Pontchartrain Causeway. No, that's an effective perspective. The bridge rises up to the horizon and then goes into the diffraction limit.
It goes down. It doesn't
Yes,
rise
down.
up. It
Yes.
goes,
Look,
it goes up
besides-
and then down.
That's what I just
The
said.
apparent curved part is extremely small. If you would take that as literal curvature, you'd end up with, yeah, a planet the size of, I don't know, a very small planet.
Planet Orleans, as
Yeah.
And Nathan's
Now,
right.
I looked at that because it is kind of interesting. If you do the math and you show the curvature in that picture and you know how many miles the causeway is, that's not true. It works out perfectly. It works out to about 3,999 miles or so. It's not perfect, but it's close to what the given radius of the Earth is. If you actually do the math and you construct a circle using the known distance from one end of the lake to the other end of the lake on the bridge, it matches up to what the Earth's radius is. So that's
No,
not
it
true.
doesn't.
It doesn't
Sorry.
No,
imply
sorry.
that
No,
the
I'm
Earth is
talking
smaller than
about
it
the
is.
actual, the thing you see in those pictures, that length. Okay, that's way too curved. You can't.
26 miles.
It's not about the official length of the lake. That's not what you see as curved in the picture. You don't see it from the beginning to the end curved. Now you see that one part of the bridge that is very, very apparently curved, and that doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it does. It's gone up to the horizon and into the diffraction limit. So you see the bridge rising up to the level of the eye of the observer in the near foreground. Then it reaches the diffraction limit and then drops behind from bottom first. Now, if you're going to assert that the mathematics demonstrate perfectly that it works on a sphere, I will immediately assert that you don't take into account any of the angular sizes of any of the stuff you're measuring when you use that mathematics. You only account for actual sizes of things. So when you're calculating out how much it's dropped over a curve, you haven't taken into account the angular size change at distance.
How would I account for that? What are
I
some
don't
known
care.
mathematics? Are you
I
aware of any kind of
don't
mathematics you could show us
how
that,
you
that I
account
could
for
use to
it.
account for that?
I don't care how your bullshit maths accounts for this. I don't care. It's not my assertion. Your moron assertion using moron maths that excludes perspective says it matches a ball when you presuppose a ball. Wowee. Number one, we don't live on a model. Number two, you're presupposing we live on a ball. That's a begging the question fallacy. Number three, what he's actually observing is the effects of perspective. The thing rises up to the midpoint of the camera. That's perspective, ignored entirely in your maths. Don't ask me how to correct your crap maths that doesn't work and doesn't match reality or include perspective, because that's not my problem, sunshine. That's your problem as a globe zealot that believes the maths is right, even though it excludes all angular relationships with each other.
I don't think you could argue that this one's a presupposition, Nathan.
You just
see
said
it with your
it
eyes.
works on the model.
It's there, right?
You just said it works on
You
the
see
model,
it.
Dick Brain. You just said it works on the model. Have you got proof of R?
I mean, if you want me to do some, okay. So if you
Answer
want me
my
to, if I
question.
come here
It's
with
a
some
yes or no
calculations that
question.
show that that bridge,
Answer my
the arc on the
question.
bridge matches up with
You
the Earth
said
properly.
it works on the model. So, the model's based on R. Have you got proof of that?
The picture is the proof.
The picture
Like, you
you
can see it
compared
right
to
there.
a model. Your comparison and proof required the mathematics and model that you assert we bloody live on. Reification fallacy. We don't live on a model, and you're saying that because your model does something, that makes it real. I'm pointing out the very fatal flaw. It excludes angular relationships. The change in angle at distance is not accounted for. So your maths, whether or not it matches, is irrelevant. Number one, we don't live on a model. Number two, it excludes perspective. In fact, it hijacks it. It calls the effect, like soundly does, of things rising up to the midpoint of the camera and then going into a diffraction limit. It calls that curve, right? No. The thing it's ignoring is what it's hijacking and calling curvature, unorthodox.
Unorthodox, ask him to explain diffraction limit.
How about that, Nathan? Can we get a diffraction limit?
Unorthodox. Do you realize why this Soundly thing is really silly? Because at 120,000 feet, there's no curvature seen. You realize that, right? So your little 16.
What do you mean there's no
mile-
curvature scene? You can see a curve in the picture or the videos. I mean,
Yeah,
you guys can at least say it's something else, but you can see curve. It's a monument to the Earth's
sorry.
curvature.
Sorry,
That bridge is a
Say it
monument.
again.
I've seen footage of Earth 120,000 feet with no curvature. So you can take a little 20-mile cylinder Earth and go somewhere with it, bro. It's ridiculous that you people think that Soundly is showing actual curvature. It's ridiculous.
I wouldn't say that's
Anybody would-
ridiculous at all. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, at face value, that's what it looks like. So that's not a ridiculous notion at
So
all.
that's what it
okay.
looks like. So that's what it is.
Yeah,
That's
so
what
at
you're
face
saying.
value, it looks
According
like it's
to your
curving
logic,
unorthodox.
yes. Flat
Unorthodox.
Earther logic. You love
Yes.
things you can see. It's directly observable.
It's not directly observable. You're comparing it to a model.
Remove.
And I don't have to compare it to a model to see it curve, man.
No, I'll say it for the third time. Pray God we have silence while he listens. He probably won't, but let's hope he does. You have the effect of perspective. It rises up to the midpoint of the camera because you are looking down the length of it. That is an effect that is ignored in the model you use to assert that that effect, the effect of things rising up to the midpoint by virtue of perspective, is ignored in your globe mathematics.
No, that's exactly why the three-dimensional GPS mapping works, because you don't have refraction, because it's just plotting
Sorry,
points
what
in
the bloody
space.
hell straw man
You
is
can-
this? Nobody mentioned refraction. So let's just get rid of this straw man straight away. Not refraction. Try to pay attention. Perspective.
Regardless.
Oh, you couldn't pay attention for long enough for me to say one word. Perspective.
I love that that's the one word. That
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
what's
hear.
happening.
Simply
That's why the
perspective.
bridge rises up. Not Earth curve. It's not curving up. It's rising up to the midpoint of the camera by virtue of perspective. That's what happens when you look at something.
Yeah, I say he dunked on you guys. You should take a look at the live stream. About an hour long. If anybody really wants to know the shape of the Earth, look at Soundly's live
Yeah,
stream.
I went into that live stream when he was doing it with his mate, with his telescope. And I went in and went, nice effect of perspective in the chat room. Triggered everybody. Because they don't want to hear it.
You know, you're up for an award, Nathan. I saw something where you and Nathan from America, you guys are up for some awards on
Sorry, I couldn't
the
give a
Flat Earth
crap.
channel.
I couldn't give a crap. Soundly is showing the effects of perspective. Something that is ignored when you assert it matches a model.
No, that's what the model does. It removes all doubt in terms of, is it perspective, is it refraction?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
No. I won't let that hang out there. Number one, it does not deal in perspective terms. It ignores all angular relationships. Number two, it does not deal with refraction. It deals with terrestrial refraction, a begging the question fallacy on steroids, where you not only assume that you have a radius, you assume light bends around at 7/6 of that radius. So no, it does not deal with refraction. That's a very real effect that we can all observe and is definitely not being accounted for in your model. It's 7/6R, terrestrial refraction, something we don't observe that's made up mathematically. It also, the model, assumes R, so you've got a two-step begging the question fallacy.
We're just talking about simply plotting points in a three-dimensional space.
I
You
don't
can't
care,
talk
we don't
about
live in
perspective
your
when you're talking
model.
about plotting points in a three-dimensional space.
So what? We don't live in that model.
Constructing a circle.
We're not. We're looking at things. We're looking at a picture of a bridge going up to the midpoint of the camera. You are then modelling it because you have a reification fallacy disorder. And you have to model it so that you can assert that's where you live. I don't live on your model or in your 3D CAD program. The picture we're talking about rises up to the midpoint of the camera. That's something that perspective does. You seem to ignore it and laugh when I say one word. Perspective. Yes, that's what's happening. It's ignored in the maths when you assert that a model matches, even though we don't live on a model.
Yeah, you don't need a perspective to draw a circle.
We're not drawing anything. We're looking at a picture of a bridge in a photograph. What is your malfunction? You bought a
talking
picture.
about him mapping it
You
out
bought
in
this up.
three-dimensional
We're on the
space
first housekeeping
and matching
question.
up
You
with the
bought this
photo.
up. You bought this up. This is your evidence of curvature. A picture of a bridge. Not drawing any circles, Muppet. So, your picture of a bridge is perspective based. That's what perspective does. If you want to deny that things rise up to the midpoint of a camera because of perspective, that's fine. You can deny it. It makes you a moron, but that's fact what happens. Now, your maths for your model ignores that.
No, you're strawmanning me here. I'm not saying that we're talking about the picture.
We're not talking about Soundly then.
Mapping out
no worries, let's just get it clear.
Points.
So any signs of curvature, we're now not talking about Soundly's picture. So is there any other signs of curvature? Because Soundly's picture we're now not talking about by the person who
we're
brought it
talking
up.
about the three-dimensional points
no, we're
that
not.
he mapped out.
No, piss off to some maths forum. No, that's not what we're
picture.
talking about. We're talking about the world. You can sod off to a maths forum if you want to talk about models in computers. Don't care. That's not what we were talking about. When we were talking about a picture that Soundly took, I was interested. Now, sod off to a maths forum or a computer forum or a CAD forum, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the world. So Soundly's picture, yeah, I can talk about that. It's perspective. Something ignored in your maths. Moving on, unless there's any other signs of curvature that aren't curvature, actually perspective.
No curvature. Let's move on.
Excellent. Any signs of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
I'm going to hold my breath while you do this, okay?
That's why no one's speaking, because you're going to have to hold your breath a long time. We're wanting you to answer the questions.
It's a bit boring.
Move on.
Unorthodox. Any sign of axial rotation?
The Foucault pendulum.
Right, how's that an axial rotation?
Tony's playing Command and Conquer.
Oh, how'd you know that?
I could hit sound effects.
Oh, I'll have to get rid of them.
Tony, come on.
Sorry, so the Foucault pendulum. Anthony, do you want to handle this or do you want me to?
Depends. You're hogging the mic a little bit. Like, why don't we pass it around? Adam, do you want to deal with the Foucault's pendulum?
Really? I do have a secondary concept with regards to the Foucault pendulum, actually, because it's supposed to be independent of the Earth, but there is actually a connection, so that there would be torsion applied to the bearing at the top as the top section rotates. It will twist above and apply shear forces onto it. So that would imply that it isn't in its own reference frame. That it is tied and affected to.
Adam, is it an Earth's axis? Is it rotating?
But I was just saying that if it was, it wouldn't be able to be declared in its own reference frame and independent of it anyway.
Axis, Adam. It's not scientific proof.
Oh, scientific? Sorry, no.
Oh, no, it's definitely outside. From what I understand, I just put it to unorthodox because it's him that brought it up. So what Adam's saying unorthodox is that given that it's attached to the building or whatever else it's spinning in, it's not in a separate reference frame proving that the Earth turns underneath. How would you address that?
Oh, this is such a silly misconception, guys.
Yeah, it is.
Whenever you talk about...
Don't talk over him, Arwen. Hold on. Arwen, just let him answer.
Okay, so you guys talk about this a lot. The Coriolis effect, right? That's what's going on with the Foucault pendulum. Whenever something is in a perfect lockstep reference frame with the Earth, rotating with the Earth, that means it's in absolute perfection in terms of lockstep. As soon as you move out of lockstep with the Earth's rotation in the slightest degree, at that point, it'll have the Coriolis effect acting on it, right? So just like...
Let him get to the end of his explanation.
Like a helicopter? No, a helicopter's in pretty much lockstep. It's not swinging back and forth. So just like winds are a thing on Earth, you can't. We say the Earth's atmosphere is in lockstep with the Earth. Generally speaking, we're not talking about perfection.
You say that, right? But the atmosphere is not a friction material, is it? It's not like a concrete
hold on. You
wall.
haven't addressed. Sorry, Anthony. Adam's point, unorthodox, you're now agreeing with. So you're saying that they are, in fact, one reference frame, as you phrase it, in lockstep. Correct?
Generally speaking.
So generally speaking, there's only one reference frame in lockstep together as one.
Yes.
Then there is no Coriolis effect. You utter moron. So you agree with us There's no
So
Coriolis
you don't
effect.
understand that wind
Shut up.
can be a thing?
Shut up. I let you finish. So there is no Coriolis effect. If the atmosphere is travelling along with the Earth, then the Earth is not rotating underneath the pendulum.
Just like if I'm moving in a car.
Sorry,
and
not
I
a
throw
new
a ball
example,
up and
Dick
down.
Brain. Let's just shut him up. So, according to an orthodox, the atmosphere and Earth are, quote, in lockstep, one reference frame, even though the Foucault pendulum is designed specifically and explicitly to show that there are two reference frames, but they're in lockstep according to an orthodox. So you agree with Adam then?
No, it's only in lockstep when it's still sitting in its stationary position.
Right.
At that moment, it's in lockstep at the very bottom. But any point it moves from the bottom, it's not in lockstep.
Oh, I see. So if you're what you're saying is if you're in a helicopter and you're directly hovering above, you're in lockstep. But if you're like a pendulum moving in one direction away from that central position, then you're not in lockstep. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
So like an aeroplane then. So an aeroplane would be moving across the surface that's moving underneath it, correct?
Definitely not in lockstep, Nathan.
So,
No,
like a
lockstep.
pendulum, the plane does move, doesn't it?
Yes.
So why don't they have different durations if the Earth is turning underneath these planes? East to west and west to east would be significantly different in terms of their duration if the Earth was actually turning underneath them, separately, as you are now asserting.
From what I understand, there is an effect, and it's pretty demonstrable. I haven't looked into it
I'm
precisely.
asking, yes, we understand what
you
you've
just don't
asserted,
understand
unorthodox. I understand what you believe. I'm pointing out the contradiction. You're saying that if you've got movement, as with the pendulum, you have two reference frames. It's not in lockstep if they are moving, like an aeroplane. That being the case, as a plane travels east to west or west to east, the duration would be vastly different because the Earth is turning underneath them. Two reference frames, right? Unorthodox?
No, not vastly different.
Oh, so now the pendulum's not travelling and giving you the deviation that takes you out of lockstep. It seems we have a glaring contradiction.
I don't see the contradictions. Like
Well,
I
that's
said,
'cause you're a
as
moron.
far as my understanding
That's 'cause
goes,
you're
airplanes
stupid.
are affected by
That's
the
'cause you're
Coriolis
stupid.
effect.
That's 'cause
Something's
you're
going on
stupid.
with the Foucault pendulum.
Yeah, shut
The
up.
same thing
Don't
is
tell us how
acting
you
on
don't get
planes.
it. Shut up. Don't tell me how you don't get it. I'll lay it out for you. No problem, moron. Yeah, slow coach. You've either got two reference frames, the Earth turning underneath the reference frame that's not turning, in which case you get a Coriolis effect, and in which case the planes would travel vastly different times, west to east and east to west, if we have two reference frames. Or we don't. It's in lockstep. One reference frame. So which is it? Because it can't be both.
I told you, planes are affected by it.
Oh, so we have different
It's just not
durations
vastly
east-
different.
Oh, really? We have vastly different times east to west, west to east, do we? No, unorthodox. They're about the same. So the Earth doesn't appear to be turning underneath these aeroplanes, my friend.
Like I said, I'm not super familiar with exactly how the Coriolis effect.
Oh, well then shut your stupid mouth. Why are you even
flight
talking?
times and all that
Shut
stuff. I could look at it and analyze it, but I
Shut
haven't done that.
your
So I
stupid
can't really-
mouth. Why are you even talking if you're not familiar with how the Coriolis works? Shut up and don't talk. Don't assert your ignorance
just
here.
like
You're
the
really
airplanes and
annoying.
their different paths.
If you don't know, shut up.
Nathan, it might be wise just to ask him to explain back to you the problem so that you know that he now understands the contradiction.
Why?
Because
We'll spend 20 minutes with his dumb fuckery.
I know, but I want to hear, does he actually understand it yet? I don't
He
think
doesn't.
he does.
He's already explained he doesn't. That's why I want to move on. Yeah, we get it now. An orthodox is dumb and doesn't understand the Coriolis effect, which is why I so effectively took his argument to pieces, and I'm now really annoyed with him as he tells us, I don't really get it, actually. Yeah, that's why you've had your ass handed to you. Shut up in future if you don't get it. Next question. Any evidence of a gas
Well, at least I
pressure?
got you to understand that when it's at its central position, it's in lockstep, and as soon as it moves
Josh,
away,
you didn't get us to
you understand that.
He doesn't get it.
You didn't get us to understand anything.
Yeah, I don't want to explain the
He
context.
repeated it back, so I'd argue he did understand it.
I understand it implicitly, you stupid moron. You think the Earth and the atmosphere are in lockstep, except under special circumstances when it doesn't meet your argument standards, which is to say that they're not in lockstep, and you have a Coriolis effect. If they're in lockstep, no Coriolis. If they are not in lockstep, Coriolis. You can't have it both ways. If you don't get this after the 4th time of me explaining it to you, I'm just going to move on. Try listening to the show back.
Such a dishonest argument. Like, you know, wind is a thing. Like, you're not telling me that you can't intellectually distinguish between the Earth moving with the atmosphere and wind.
Unorthodox.
Don't tell me you can't understand.
Are you not
that.
understanding?
I don't
that
believe you.
You said yourself the helicopter hovering above Earth. That's in lockstep with the Earth, right? So it's the same reference frame. That's why there's no Coriolis.
Keyword.
It's a lot closer than an airplane. It's not. If you analyze it, I'm sure it wouldn't be perfectly. I'm sure there's a very
so
very
you're
small
saying that that's the
Coriolis
same
effect.
reference frame, but yet the pendulum that's actually attached to Earth is a different reference frame because it's moving. That's
Once
what
it
you're trying
moves
to
from
get
the
us to
central
understand.
position, once it moves from the central position, just like if you're on a merry-go-round and you have a stick facing from you in the center out towards the edge, as soon as you move it a little bit, it's moving in reference to
I'll ask
the
one question.
Earth.
I'll ask a
But
question, and if I
it's
get the
still
wrong
when
answer,
it's
I want
not.
to move on.
It's generally moving
I'll ask you a
around the
question,
merry-go-round. But if you wiggle it, it's not
I'm
in
sick of
perfect
your word
lockstep.
salad. Right, I'll ask you a question. If you can give me the right answer, fine, we'll continue the discussion. If you can't, we'll move on. What is the Coriolis force?
F equals omega squared. What is it? R divided by M.
No.
I forget the two forms, but I could get it for you if you want me to.
No. Describe it in literal terms. You're about to give an example with a roundabout. Explain in your example what force is experienced.
It's just the momentum of the object. As you're moving on a circular path, your momentum wants to keep going in one direction while the Earth rotates underneath you. If you're moving. So it's your
Excellent.
momentum.
Thank you. So something travels through the second reference frame and the roundabout continues to rotate underneath, correct?
Say that again?
So you're on a roundabout, you throw a ball as the roundabout turns, the ball goes in a straight line, and the roundabout continues to rotate underneath, correct?
Yes.
Right. So a plane travels through the air, and the Earth continues to rotate underneath, correct?
From what I hear, I believe you're correct.
Well, that doesn't happen. Do you not get it? The planes don't take different durations west to east and east to west. The Earth isn't turning underneath them.
As a matter of fact,
what is the Coriolis? Go ahead.
Don't ask me a question.
Jonathan.
You see,
Just
we've got
real
to the
quick.
stage again, and now he's asking me something. So, I've explained this contradiction to you now 5 times.
No, you haven't backed it up with anything, Nathan. You haven't shown what the Coriolis
this is
effect
your
says it's
assertion.
going to be versus
What do you
what
mean?
it's going to be.
Listen,
you haven't
dickhead.
shown any evidence.
I'm
You
not
just
making the
spouted a bunch of
assertion.
show
You
some
are.
evidence for what you're
What are
saying.
you
What is it
talking about?
supposed to be
I don't need
versus
to
what
back
it really is?
anything. I'm not making any assertion. You assert Coriolis. You. I asked.
Talking about a Foucault pendulum, I'm not applying it to everything in the world. If you want to go out and extrapolate to airplanes, that's your onus is on you to explain it how it works in that scenario and how it should be off. I didn't bring up airplanes, you did.
Yeah, it's axial rotation of the Earth. You brought up the Foucault pendulum, which is designed to demonstrate 2 separate reference frames. If we are to accept the conclusion given to us by that pendulum, then the planes would take different durations, but they don't.
Prove it.
And
What do
what
you
I
mean,
was going to
prove
say
it?
before I got dropped was I've
I'm
actually
so close
taken
to
flights.
kicking you out. What do you mean, prove it? You're telling me that you can get up in a plane, hover, and the Earth just carries on underneath you when you've told us that helicopters don't suffer this effect with your double-speak nonsense?
No, prove to me that the flight times are exactly the same.
I give up. Someone help me out.
They aren't exactly the same, but I've taken flights where the duration for going from west to east is actually less than going from east to west, which doesn't make any sense.
Is that with the wind or against it?
Sorry, we're talking about Earth turn, for the love of God!
I mean, there's so much more here that's complicating the situation. Like Alan B said, wind, the jet streams, all this other stuff that is going on, and you're trying to isolate this tiny little thing.
And you know what? I used to work at an airport, and when I've asked the pilot, how does that happen? Like, how is it that you can get to, like, I can get from L.A. to New York faster than New York to L.A., and they say, yeah, the jet stream. But they've never said, oh, because of the Earth curve. Or the Earth rotation. I'm sorry. Okay.
So this
I'm at least glad I got you to understand that.
This Foucault pendulum does not
prove.
You
just debunked yourself.
Sorry, this Foucault pendulum doesn't prove the Earth is turning in any way, shape, or form. It leaves you with a contradiction.
No, I don't see the contradiction. I'm at least glad I got you to understand the difference in
movement
generally.
For a sixth time. Let's shut him up. This stupid moron who's doing my head in. Yeah, the contradiction is as follows. The Foucault pendulum suggests that you have two reference frames. Two. One that turns underneath the other. Well, if that's true, you'd have the Earth turning underneath helicopters, or aeroplanes, or anything that's not attached to the ground.
No, that's not true at all.
Oh, well, that's what you have if you've got two reference frames. That's why you get deviation. That is, by definition, the Coriolis effect.
No, imagine you're...
Yeah, we got you to define it, not no. Yes, you throw a ball on a roundabout, the roundabout continues to turn underneath. That is the Coriolis effect.
So, unorthodox, what's the difference between the pendulum and the plane?
Oh my God! I mean, a list of things. One, it has an engine. Two, it's involved with air currents. I mean, those are the two major ones.
I don't mean it in that context, and you know I don't.
Oh, you talking about with the helicopter?
If you're saying that the helicopters and the planes are moving with the Earth's atmosphere, how is that different with the Foucault's pendulum that you claim that Earth spins underneath it, and that it shows the Earth turn?
Okay, I'll tell you. Take just a second. It has to imagine I gotta take advantage of my shit. My mind here for a second. Okay, so imagine you're on a sphere. Now extend a pole straight up. Okay.
Sorry, no.
Your helicopter's on the end of the pole.
No, you're
as long as it's rotating in perfection with the globe.
What part of no don't you get?
It works.
No, you will not start your example with imagine you're on a bloody sphere. You're not here to affirm the consequent. You're not here to beg the question. Don't start your example with, let's all imagine we're on a sphere that's got an axis that's rotating. No!
How are we going to talk about the Coriolis effect and the differences if we're not talking about a sphere?
You'll show
That's
me.
exactly what we're talking
You'll
about.
show me something that actually demonstrates an effect of the Coriolis. Now, you're saying the pendulum shows that. Well, if it does, the planes would demonstrate the same effect, and they don't.
That's why I'm asking for the difference. What's the difference between a pendulum with the Earth spinning under it and a plane with the Earth not spinning under it because it's in a fixed rotation point? Why is there a difference between the two?
Because one is essentially in almost perfect lockstep with the Earth, the helicopter. The other one, the plane, is obviously not. It's traveling along the surface in any direction, north, south, east, or west. The helicopter isn't traveling north, south, east, or west.
I've got to point it out to you again, unorthodox. You can't have one and the other. It's not simultaneously capable of being in lockstep under circumstances and not in lockstep under other circumstances. It's either we have the Coriolis effect or we don't.
We do, as the Foucault pendulum shows.
Excellent. So the planes take different durations east to west and west to east as the Earth turns underneath, then, unorthodox?
According to Chocolate Saying, yes.
No, they don't. He's just pointed out that you get slower durations when you should have the Earth turning towards you, speeding up your journey vastly.
Exactly unorthodox. Don't try to mistake my point, brother. Don't try that. You know exactly what I was trying to say.
But this nonsense.
I'm
does
at
not
least
prove
thankful
the
that
Earth
you guys
turns.
seem to understand the difference.
Yeah,
at least
we understand
you
it.
did
You
before
don't.
perfect lockstep versus general motion.
You don't. That's the point. That's the contradiction. You don't have a circumstance where you have perfect lockstep and then a separate set of circumstances when you don't. You either have the Coriolis effect or you don't. That's the essence of the contradiction.
Nathan, as soon as it moves out of perfect lockstep, then the Coriolis effect acts. Like if you have a swinging pendulum.
Well, Dick Brain, let's just lay it out for you. Again, you can't have it both ways.
Directly
You can't have it
with
both
gravity.
ways. You
At
cannot
that moment,
have...
there is no Coriolis effect. As soon as it moves out from that position...
You can't have it both ways. You can't have a circumstance where you do have it, to make your example with a Foucault pendulum when asked if the Earth turns, and then have it not happening when the planes take off and leave the ground into the separate reference frame that apparently the pendulum proves. You cannot have both.
You're wrong about the planes.
Oh, right.
It does have an effect
how?
on planes.
Oh, right.
Tell us
So-
how. How is
Same way it does as the Foucault pendulum. It's acting a force that's derived from an equation that's shown to be proven. That
Sorry,
you can do in a
that's
laboratory.
what I was trying to get in
The
with.
Foucault
Sorry,
pendulum. I could set up a
say
Foucault
again.
pendulum and derive the
You're
equation
coming
for
to a
you
force.
if you want me to.
Sorry, unorthodox. You said the word force. So there is a force that this equation describes, correct?
A pseudo force, yes, the momentum.
Pseudo
We know what
force.
pseudo
Pseudo
means,
force.
right?
Wow.
So
We got a new invention.
Good word,
why,
brother.
why would it be labelled a pseudo force?
Because it's the momentum and it helps your intellectual understanding of the situation.
No, it's not momentum.
No.
It has nothing to do with momentum. So
I
you're
think
wrong.
it's because
you
it's
don't
based on
understand Coriolis.
pseudoscience.
Why would it be labelled a pseudo force?
I just told you because it's your momentum. It's
I'll
not.
say it again. You're a moron and incorrect.
Nuh-uh.
Nuh-uh, Nathan.
Yeah, so this force, how strong is this force?
Well, if you have a car, so I did this example the other day, okay? So if you have a car traveling at 100 mile per hour, or I'm sorry, so I've got a car here traveling on a track that is 1 mile, it's a 1 mile arc, okay? And it's traveling at, let's see here, it's traveling at 100 miles per hour. Okay, 1 mile track, 100 miles per hour. The force is roughly 12.6% of gravity. Once you extend that to a 100-mile radius,
Sorry,
at
I've got to stop you there, moron. So I asked the question, why would it be labelled a pseudo force? And you go into an explanation about actual forces, clearly demonstrating to everybody on the panel and everybody in the audience that you don't understand the difference. You think there's an actual force at play here, don't you, unorthodox?
I just told you it's momentum.
No, I'll say it for the third time. You're wrong. And my question, which you don't know the answer to, why would it be labelled a pseudo-force, would tell you why you're wrong, but Dunning-Kruger dictates that you keep arguing with me. Your own ignorance doesn't stop you. You don't go and Google search it. You just keep asserting that there's examples with cars and forces that are equivalent, when they're not, because you're a bonehead.
Nathan, I would argue that, you know, the 100,000 people that came before you and analyzed this were correct, and perhaps you're wrong.
Yeah, I don't care about the 100,000 appeal. That's another fallacy. Appeal to consensus fallacy, that's called. You and me are talking about this. I've asked you 3 times why they'd call it a pseudo-force. You keep giving us examples of actual forces, rather than actually
What does it matter? What does it matter, Nathan?
It's critical.
Why does it...
Yeah, you don't know, do you, moron?
No,
Yeah.
Why does that matter?
Yeah, why
Can you
does it
explain
matter that you don't know?
Unorthodox.
Yeah, you don't
You
know
don't
what you
think-
don't know. So you don't know how it's important it is or isn't, and you're asking me. You're the one using this as an example of axial rotation.
No,
So
you're the
asking
one who
me
brought
why
up
it's important.
pseudo-force. What is the distinction here? Why is that a problem?
Well, maybe it'd be wise to find that out before you make assertions that pendulums prove the Earth's spin.
No, I don't think there's a problem. You're the one that's asserting that there's a problem with it
You
being a
don't think
pseudo-force.
so? Well, go
Tell me
away
how
and
there's a
think about
problem
how
with
there's
it being
no
a
problem
pseudo-force.
elsewhere then. Go away and think you've got no issue. Ignore everything we say, don't do any research, and just tell yourself that you're right. Because that's a job well done, moron.
You brought it up, Nathan. If you can't explain why that's a problem, then, you know,
I have.
there's a hole in your,
I have
a hole in your story here.
simultaneously and over again. Probably this is the 6th time, I believe, that I've explained it to you. There's a glaring contradiction. You can't have the atmosphere in lockstep and not in lockstep under certain circumstances. It's either subject to the Coriolis effect because the Earth is turning underneath, or it's not. You want it to be both. That is
We're talking about the pseudo-force.
Oh, he's still talking. That is the essence of the contradiction, you buffoon.
Oh, you said there was a problem with labeling it a pseudo-force.
No, that's not a problem. That's just what it's called, and I'm asking you why it would be called that. And every time I do, you take us to actual forces.
No, I haven't taken you to actual forces. I've taken
really?
you to
A car travelling around a track at 100 miles an hour with a mathematical equation for the force that it can experience. That's not taking us to actual forces, is it, you moron? Yeah, it is. You're a dick and stupid, and I enjoy humiliating you.
Okay, let me walk you through this. It won't take just a second. I think we can all understand why it's a pseudo.
Don't walk me through anything. You're a stupid muppet. I am becoming more stupid just by having this conversation with you. So please, for the love of God, don't try and walk me through anything ever again, ever.
Unorthodox.
You seem to got it sometimes.
There's no pseudo-force. There's only force and there's no force. Pseudo-force is just ridiculous.
You know, if you've got a girlfriend, if you've got a real-life girlfriend, then you have a girlfriend. But if we use the term, it's a pseudo-girlfriend, what does that mean?
Well, that's another common misconception and distraction. That's not the same thing in physics, okay?
What is a pseudo-girlfriend in this context?
There's no context that is equivalent in this situation.
Yeah, it's just humiliating. You don't even know how badly you're being humiliated right now, which is the best.
There's not. Yeah, I mean, you keep telling me, the panel and the audience, that this is a false equivalency because you don't know why it's relevant. Trying to describe? Is that not a common practice in science?
You don't know why this is even relevant.
Gravity. You know why? Because it's not real.
No, Arwin, don't tell him the answer. So, girlfriend, real thing. Pseudo-girlfriend, what's a pseudo-girlfriend?
Science, different definition from general life.
So in science, what's the difference between a force and a pseudo-force?
Well, pseudo-force is momentum, and it depends on the situation. In this case, we're talking about momentum.
Right.
So that's the difference.
We're not.
One's momentum, the other is actually
I said this 3 times.
Something moving.
He's deaf. He's clearly deaf.
Imperfect.
I said this 3 times. I'll say it again. Just maybe get a pen and write it down this time. We are not talking about momentum.
So
that's
again,
what centrifugal force is. That's what we're talking about.
We're talking about the Coriolis effect. I mean, literally,
yes.
Are you now going to strawman us that we've been talking about a different subject this entire time? We're not that slow. We are not as dumb as you. Don't assume our stupidity level is the same as yours. We do know what we're talking about. You've already confessed on several occasions. You haven't got the vaguest notion what you're even on about.
Back to the pseudo-force. What's the difference between a pseudo-force and a force in science?
In this situation, a pseudo-force is your momentum, and an actual force is F equals ma.
Right, one sounds
that's an example. That's not an explanation. That's an example, not an explanation.
Yeah, what is
I would say the example explains it.
No, it's an example. It doesn't explain it.
If I said what's the difference between hot and cold, you would say you'd get burnt with hot, and then cold makes you shiver, right? What's the difference between a force and a pseudo-force in science? If it's got its own unique interpretation, what is the difference?
I don't know how else to explain it to you besides what we've already said.
We've got the audience and panel giving him the answer right now.
What's the answer?
I think the fact that you've missed that from both the chat and Alan in the Hangout makes it even more priceless.
I know what it is. I don't know the exact definition from Webster. Okay, I'm not Google here.
So why don't you help yourself out and maybe Google it? Like for a second. Like it'll take you a second. Just Google it so you know what you're talking about. Jesus Christ.
Choco, if you're arguing against it, you should know equally.
Well, no, he's trying to redefine pseudo-force in this context, and I want him to explain the difference.
Yeah, from actual interaction between objects. Pseudo-forces are not real interactions.
It's a fictitious force.
No, it's not.
That's what it says.
Well, it can be called
It says it clearly in the definition that I'm looking at. It says
Right,
fictitious
so let's get unorthodox to get a definition in
Just
science
repeat
or
it for Alan.
pseudo-force.
Hold on,
Let's see
Anthony.
what it
Sorry,
says.
sorry to interrupt you, Anthony. Just because of that little back and forth, just so it doesn't go unnoticed. Just repeat what you just said to Alan again, if you don't mind, Chocolate.
that it's a fictitious force.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it took me 2 seconds to look that up, even though I didn't have to because I know what the word pseudo means.
So how does that help our understanding of what's going on? Saying
tell us-
that.
Because you're talking about an imaginary force, man.
No, you don't understand the words in the context that they're being used.
So
Exactly.
explain it to us.
Oh,
Explain
okay. I
the
don't
difference.
understand what the word fictitious means.
No, hang on. Explain the difference between
Understand
a
the
force
context. You
and a
gotta
pseudo-force.
understand what it means first.
Tony, real forces are those that arise from actual interaction between objects.
Right, so what's a
Pseudo-force
pseudo-force?
is not the result of interaction between objects that arise due to the change of frame of reference.
So
And
can you
that
give
is
it
why
an example
pseudo.
of one?
So Alan, so essentially, to have this force, there must be a change of reference frame.
It's interaction between objects, Nathan.
Yeah.
Right, so can you give us an example where there's a force but there's no interaction between the objects?
The Coriolis force, what we were just talking about. And I don't really understand how bringing some extremely tight definition from basically mathematics and physics that incorporates your understanding of reference frames and all these other things is going to help you guys understand this. You are completely misunderstanding everything in relationship to it. So I don't think going back to the basics where it comes from is going to help you. That's going to hurt you because you
No,
don't
that's fair
understand it. I'm trying to take it to something that's real world.
Fair enough.
So let's
Like a
make
car
it
traveling on
let's
an
make
arc.
it real world.
Yeah.
Let's make it real world. Can you give us
Exactly.
an example where there is a pseudo force that results in not an interaction between two objects that we can observe? Where would this apply?
A merry-go-round. If you have a ball on a merry-go-round, at the very tip, as it's spinning, it's going to want to go out, straight out. If you draw a circle and you have a right angle at the top in the direction of rotation, that is the direction that the ball wants to move.
Yeah. So
Right.
where's
Like if
the
you
force?
draw a circle with your mind, top right corner, arrow going to the top right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
but they
rotating in that
describe-
direction.
Yeah, okay.
The
we got
momentum
it.
of
We
the
got it.
object
We
wants
got
to
it. You
keep
don't need to
going
say
in
it
that
4 more
direction.
times. We got it. We understand. So where's the force?
What about
It's acting inward towards the center of the circle.
Oh,
What
again.
about
So you
centrifugal
believe there's a
orthodox?
force moving the ball inwards?
Yes, by friction.
No, you stupid moron. That's the point. There's no force curving the ball. It's an apparent deflection because you turn underneath the ball that carries on in a straight line. So from your vantage point, it appears to be curving, even though it's not. Hence, apparent force. No force. Fictitious force. Idiot.
It appears to be curving even though
Oh,
it's...
don't repeat back what I've just told you and broken down after the last 40 minutes, like you actually understood it the whole time. You arrogant little prick.
Yeah, you guys
Yeah,
are-
no
are
force,
going nowhere
moron.
with this.
Yeah, we babied you through it. Don't repeat it back like you understood it the whole time. Yeah, so no force, pseudo-force, apparent deviation. Now, that apparent deviation occurs because the roundabout turns underneath. So, ipso facto, if we have an Coriolis effect, the Earth turns underneath the planes and helicopters and balls that are no longer attached to that reference frame. Pity we don't see any of those effects though, eh?
No, Foucault pendulum isn't showing those effects at all.
Oh, it's not. Even though that's
Exactly,
the
that's
one
our
thing that's
point.
supposed to be. I love it. So you don't even understand your own example.
Wow.
You're saying it
Yeah.
doesn't show those effects. That's the one thing that is supposed to be showing those
After
effects,
played
you
yourself.
bonehead.
Congratulations.
Best
You
jokes
are,
are the
again, the dumbest person to have ever frequented this panel.
So what's going on with the Foucault pendulum?
Who cares? It's your example, you stupid muppet. Don't ask me to explain your example. We're on the second housekeeping question. It's taken 45 minutes.
It's just following its pattern. It's just following the momentum. It's following
This
a
is
grid
what happens when
pattern
you've got
as
glow
it
beds on.
goes. It always does. There is no other thing affecting
It rotates. It's not going back and forth in a straight line like you started the motion.
But it doesn't rotate if you start out just swinging it straight. Only if you deviate, then the whole thing starts to form like a mandala. Okay, it all depends on what momentum it gets.
This is
That's
what's
the only
known
thing
as
that's there.
this is what's known as pseudoscience. It's where you believe shit that's not capable of actually being proven to be true.
We're talking about a real world example, guys. You can do it in your living room.
It does.
You can do it in your freaking living room yourself. It's very easy. Don't sit there and tell me it's not real when you can do it in your living room.
Do what? The purpose of the Foucault pendulum is to demonstrate that there's two reference frames.
That's what you're not understanding.
Do what? The purpose is to demonstrate two reference frames. That's what it's doing. So when you say you can do it in your bedroom, what? Prove there's two reference frames, only to then get on a plane and say to the stewardess, oh, this will take longer, right? I've proved with a pendulum that Earth turns underneath us after we take off.
Unorthodox, I've got a question.
Sure, Alan.
In Newton mechanics, is centrifugal force considered a pseudo force?
Who gives a crap? Shut up, Alan. This is a housekeeping question about axial rotation.
No, Alan's question's good. Alan's question's good.
Does it prove axial rotation?
I'm just asking a question.
No, Nathan, let's go with it. Is centrifugal force an actual force or not? Unorthodox.
Centripetal force, when we're talking about a rotating reference frame, I'm sure you guys really understand the reference frame and all this, how it moves in lockstep. But
is centrifugal force an actual force, or is it a pseudo force?
Centrifugal force is a pseudo force in the what we're talking about.
Moron, it's an actual force.
I can't believe this. There's 2 questions from housekeeping. This is question 2.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
No, it is.
Centrifugal force.
Centrifugal force is an example of a pseudo force. They're equal and opposite. Like if you have a ball on a string and you're swinging it around, there's one force acting inward, right? Centripetal force, and then there's centrifugal force, which is the force outward.
Well, you got it wrong. It's the wrong way round.
No, I got Google up right here.
Yeah, so read what it says about centrifugal.
The example I've got is the centrifugal force is an example of a pseudo force. That's what I'm looking at.
Let's get that on screen and let's see is that true. Centrifugal.
It's one or the other. It's one or the other. They're equal and opposite. It's the exact same equation.
Just present it.
Hold on.
Let's see it.
You've just read out a quote. I want to see that on screen.
Yeah, I want to see it too.
It's on my iPad.
Let's have a look. Put it on camera.
Okay, well, hold on. You want to see it?
Yes, please.
Yeah, of course we want to see it.
Okay, hold on. Let me get in some light here.
Because you're mistaking centrifugal as centripetal.
Yeah, Unorthodox, I think, and I had
it still doesn't.
Once before where he tried to argue that there was.
This is like Jimmy. Do you remember when Jimmy read from a citation and he added shit that wasn't there? Unorthodox is doing that right now. He's claiming a citation that is not real.
That's not true. Hold on, I'll show you live off my iPad.
Let's go on then, screen share.
I don't have a screen share. I'm gonna have to show you my iPad. I've got it pulled up on my iPad. I got this up on my laptop.
Unorthodox.
Travis,
can you hear me?
You have to look at my screen.
Travis, you're a bit low.
Yeah, your screen is.
Well, I don't know how to raise my volume. Unorthodox.
Right here.
Can you hear me real quick?
Hold on, let me highlight this.
Perhaps if you stop moving, then the camera can actually focus.
I know. I was highlighting it first.
Nathan, are we only on question 2?
It's too blurry. Can you just read it? Read that highlighted line.
It says, this is why centrifugal force a pseudo force. A pseudo force. A physically apparent but non-existent force felt by an observer in a non-inertial frame. Newton's laws of motion hold true with such a reference frame only if the existence of such a force is presumed.
No, it isn't an
the centrifugal force is an example of a pseudo force.
No,
right there. You can pause it and you can see. I'm not making this up.
Right.
And
So
it doesn't really.
Can you copy and paste the link?
Hold on. Stop. Just tell us where it's from. Where's the reference from?
This is from dictionary.com under pseudo force. It's like an example of a pseudo force. It's dictionary.com.
Let's look it up.
Well, that was a lovely aside. Did it prove axial rotation? Did we get any further in the housekeeping? Did it help?
No, hang on. Let's see whether he's got it right. I think he's misquoting it intentionally to make himself sound
I'm
correct.
not
when he's
misquoting
actually
it. It's
wrong.
right there. I just showed it to you.
No, we can't read it though. It was blurred.
I read it. I
Well,
read
if
it
you
enough to say.
pause it- if
I
you
saw the
pause it,
title. Why
you
the
can
title?
read it.
The title of that paragraph was why it is a pseudo force, right?
Yes.
Centrifugal force in a non-inertial reference frame isn't centrifugal force. If it's non-inertial, it's not moving. So it can't. There's no force there if it's not moving. It has to be in a moving reference frame. Otherwise, you're not going to get the force. But it's not a pseudo force. That's centripetal.
No, you got it backwards.
No, I don't. You've got it
But
backwards.
it really doesn't matter. What matters is that they're both there. It doesn't matter like what name you give to one or the other. What matters is the concepts and ideas and math behind it and the experiments behind it.
Right, I'm sharing my screen, Nathan. Let's get it on and let's get this point addressed because he's got this completely wrong. So dictionary.com, you say?
Mm-hmm.
Fuck's sake. It's because I'm too busy playing the game.
It's got red pill philosophy, something or other.
Man, that guy has got such a punchable face. He really does. That mustache.
You're just associating that because he does man hits woman, woman hits man.
Has he been
Right, so listen, look at my screen. Tell me if I'm on the right page. Dictionary.com, centrifugal force. An outward force, not a pseudo force, an outward force on a body rotating about an axis, assumed equal and opposite to the centripetal force, postulated to account for the phenomena seen by an observer in the rotating body. You gave an example that was non-inertial reference frames and a pseudo force. This is talking about a centrifugal being an outward force on a rotating body. It's the exact opposite of what you defined it as before. So I want the
No, I was talking about the momentum. Remember the momentum?
I don't care. You read from
That's exactly what this
dictionary.com.
is.
You read from dictionary.com, and when I look it up, it doesn't do what you say.
Scroll down. Scroll down. It's the next. It's down a little bit. Scroll down.
Centrifugal
Right.
force.
Scroll down. Right there. Right there. Centrifugal force in science. Right there, Anthony.
A fictitious force that can be thought of as acting outwards on anybody that rotates or moves along a continuum.
Brilliant.
It does say it. How can it say a fictitious force there and then say centrifugal force is not? Oh, it does say it.
Tony, that were fantastic.
So hang on a minute. Someone's going to have to tell me how this is wrong, right? Because I've always
Hold on,
understood
I'm not going to allow
centrifugal to be a
this. What the
force.
hell is going on? So Anthony misinterprets
Listen,
something that's
turn
completely
me
off
up.
topic because it's
Can I
got
get a
double-
concession, Anthony?
Concession.
No, I
What
need
about
an
the concession
explanation.
that the Foucault pendulum has a direct contradiction when attempting to prove that the Earth spins in the form of non-inertial reference frames only?
Yeah, no. We all know wind's a thing, right?
Sorry,
Turn
is
me
that
up-
a
turn me up
concession?
real quick.
Hold on, you were just asking for a concession on this non-point.
Yeah, here you go. Here you go. Here's an example right here. The circular
Oh,
circular
this
arc
is a
that
straw
he's looking
man.
at right here.
This
The
is a
path
red
of inertia.
herring.
That's the centrifugal
Stop
force.
it! What the hell is going
You
on?
just showed
This is
it.
a red herring. So rather than admitting that you've got a glaring contradiction in your example with the Foucault pendulum, you've taken on Anthony onto this side route. He's bit, even though I said I didn't want to do it, and now you're asking him for a concession. The question was about axial rotation. You offered up a glaring contradiction in the form of Coriolis.
Nathan, he
Now
made
you're
a large
talking over
point
me.
to point out that I
Why
was
aren't
trying
you
to,
conceding?
deceive you
Why
guys.
are you demanding a concession on this non-point when the original question was about
It's a
axial
point. He was saying I was
rotation,
trying to
and now you're
deceive you
talking
guys.
all over me, aren't you?
Yeah, but he can't admit that I'm not trying to deceive you here, and that's actually what it says.
Sorry,
I'm not
that's a
saying
non-point.
concede that gravity exists.
So
I'm
we're
just
gonna
saying
stay on this
concede that
non-point.
I'm not
So you're
trying
gonna
to do
talk
anything
non-stop over me
here.
about this non-point that you want Anthony to concede. That's taken up about 3 or 4 minutes of the show, even though we've spent 45 minutes on one housekeeping question that you have not conceded. But after 2 minutes and a misinterpretation about a non-topical subject, you want Anthony to make you a concession about this point that means nothing in regards to axial rotation and the Coriolis effect example with the Foucault pendulum. That's what you want after 40 minutes.
Yep.
Right, hang on. Can I? Let me just push this
No,
one
you
step
just,
further.
Anthony, you bit on this, and now he's demanding concession from you after 40
I'm not
minutes of
asking you to
non-concession.
concede that gravity exists. I'm just asking you to
Guys,
concede
stop,
that
stop,
you were
stop.
wrong.
Guys, stop a sec. You asked for a concession, right? I will concede that it does appear to be defined that way when you look it up. However,
why are you doing this? This is a non-point. This is. Alan's loving this. Well done, Anthony. So you're giving a concession.
Have a little intellectual honesty,
So
Nathan.
40 minutes of this garbage.
Helps him here.
40 minutes, and at the end of the show, we get a concession from Anthony.
Hang on a minute. It's conditional.
Yeah, I'm sure you're loving this, Alan. Absolutely loving it.
Hang on a sec.
God forbid he be honest, Nathan.
Yeah, now Anthony's pride's going to get in the way while he goes on and on about his concession, about this non-point that we didn't argue about for 40 minutes.
Please. Now, unorthodox. Force, according to science and according to mathematics, force equals mass times acceleration. We see a mass that gets accelerated away from the vertical. How is that? If you're going to argue that centrifugal force is a fictitious force, it does satisfy the definition of F equals ma, does it not?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, it does. That's why it's called a pseudo force, because it meets that criteria.
Accept this crap. Can't quite believe that's just happened after 40 minutes of hard work, getting to the point where we go over and over and over and over and over the exact same contradiction, only for them to get a minor point in at the end, and Anthony want to labour it indefinitely and concede indefinitely and talk about that for the last part of the show. Unbelievable. So yeah, no concession that Coriolis effect does not in any way, shape or form prove that we have an axial rotation. Second question in the housekeeping. But it is time to run out, so we've run out of time on the live show. With that, I will say, first and foremost, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience who've tuned into this live debate, and of course a massive thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. If you're watching on the Nathan Oakley 1980 stream, you will be privy to the after show, which will continue in a moment, so stay tuned for that. Once again, a massive thank you to all of you in the live audience. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
By your mathematics.
I would have to look at the reference frame and exactly how it's defined with the reference frame to concede that point. I'll take a look at it.
The definition of force is mass.
Well, I don't know how force and it necessarily applies to the reference frame. Like, you have to relate it back to the reference frame to see if it actually.
It's a bit like gravity, isn't it?
It's just not that simple.
How is this any different to gravity when we say about relative density and somewhat changing because of the differential, right? You guys say, what's moving? It must be a force. I'm going to use that against you now and say, well, we see a mass moving away from vertical because of the rotation. Therefore, if you're going to claim it with gravity, I'm going to claim it here. And it is actually a force by your own application of Newton's first law.
Oh, yes. In that sense, yes. It's pseudo force. I mean, it's
right.
It's the momentum. Like I said, imagine a ball on a string.
No, not pseudo force.
Right?
It's not PF equals MA. It's F equals MA.
Yes, they're equal and opposite. In every system, you have an equal and opposite interaction, or else the ball would be moving away from the endpoint. Like if a ball on a string.
I'm
moving outward.
I'll concede it can be a pseudo force if you concede that it contradicts the assertion by Newton at its first law of motion that states that an object at rest will F equals ma. It contradicts that because on the one hand it is clearly moving, and on the other hand you're calling it pseudo, which you have got a bit of support for, but it still satisfies the definition of force according to F equals ma. So do you agree that there is a contradiction there?
I don't see the contradiction. Like I said, I have to look at how the reference frame applies to it. I don't believe there would be a contradiction, or else, these 100,000 people that have analyzed this.
We see a mass accelerating from vertical. That equals force. So I'm not going to concede that you were correct with it being a pseudo force, because it's not. It is accelerating. I'm going to say that you've got it wrong, even though you've got citations to support you, but it's a contradiction in science.
I'll tell you this, Anthony, that is used extremely, extremely commonly in engineering, mechanical engineering, for all kinds of rotating objects.
F equals ma, right? That's used a lot, right?
Well, that and the F equals omega squared R.
Yeah, but have you ever heard of pseudo F equals ma? I haven't.
Well, I haven't I've heard of this.
Yeah, just because you don't heard of it, Tony. I mean, there's a dictionary definition there that proves you're wrong.
No, it contradicts the force.
Why won't you
equals
accept it? It's the written word.
direct contradiction. You can't have F equals ma, and then when we see an accelerating mass, you then say, well, that's not really a force because something else in your science tells you it contradicts. Because that is an accelerating mass. It's accelerating away from vertical. But you're saying that's not really a force. I'm saying it satisfies the definition.
But you're wrong.
Can I show you?
Right. I'm wrong. So force equals ma must be wrong then, Alan. Is that right?
Show my screen. Or go ahead, Alan. Go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
I was going to ask if you'd show my screen. I'm going to show you the equation for this force, okay?
I don't care what I'm just pointing out that there's a direct contradiction that on the one hand you say it's a force equals ma, but then equally you say it's a pseudo force for some reason.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show you. I've got something to back up my argument here. If you'll show my screen, you have to look at it. It's just the equation, and if anybody's watching, they're not going to know anything I'm talking about if you're not showing the screen, Nathan. But can you see it? It's just F equals m v squared divided by r. So there's no F equals ma there. It's F equals m v squared divided by r.
Yeah, that
or
is the A,
F equals r omega squared m.
That is the acceleration. It's the velocity divided by the radius of the arc of the circle.
Well said, Adam.
It is. You're exactly right. But I'm just trying to kind of explain to him how it's not exactly what he's thinking here. There's no explicit.
No, it's exactly
acceleration form.
It's exactly what he's saying. It's just derived further, so you can input the units to calculate based on the speed of rotation, and of course that speed of rotation, because it's on a circular rotation, is relevant. The speed is relevant to the size of the circle that it's rotating on.
The point is just that there's not an explicit.
No, the point is that what
here.
Andy said was totally correct with regards to the formula.
No, that's your point. I'm talking about my point. My point is that there's not an explicit
You were contradicting
A.
Anthony's point, and I'm saying you were incorrect to contradict it. He was correct.
So I'm incorrect in saying that there's not explicit A in the equation.
No, you are correct in saying that. You are incorrect in implying that doesn't mean A isn't expressed. A is then further derived so that you can input the units from your
That's
observation.
not my point. That's not my point.
No, but it is my point.
So yours was just a petty little point that there isn't the letter A in there.
Well, I trying to break it down a little simpler for you.
Sorry, I was trying to have an intelligent conversation. I didn't know you was just being.
No, you're completely misconstruing my point. My point was just that there's not an explicit.
What, like we're doing with Anthony's
up front like that.
Yeah.
The issue is force. You said was a fictitious force, and you found evidence to support it. However, F equals ma, and we have an accelerating mass, so it does satisfy the definition for force. But you're saying that it's a pseudo force. I was always of the view that it was an actual force, and it was centripetal that was the pseudo force. But you did get a citation for it. But I'm going to use that now against you and say this is another one of those examples where it contradicts itself in science. Can't have a force being an accelerated mass and then pick and choose when it applies. It either is or it is not.
It applies. It's just a distinction to help you understand what's happening.
No, what's the distinction then?
The distinction is that one's a physical connection and the other is due to the object's momentum. So it's just simply that. It's just a distinction to help you understand what's going on in the situation.
Well, it's still a force. It's still an accelerating mass.
You're correct.
Connected or not doesn't make any difference. If it's moving, according to Newton, it's a force.
Well, at least I got a concession that, I'm just trying to get a little intellectual honesty here. I'm not trying to say, like, you have to give up any kind of major area here. I'm just saying the concession was that I was not trying to deceive you. I was presenting exactly what was shown to me. You were trying to say that on the iPad was something not.
No, respectfully, mate. Respectfully, mate. The reason, Anthony, just give me a sec. The reason I only stepped in was the point where you were starting to be intellectually dishonest. I've sat there quite quietly. It was the point where you were doing that.
What was I being intellectually dishonest about?
Mate, I'm not getting drawn in. I've made my point.
I don't
need a childish. I'm sure. Do you ever duck, or does everything go over your head?
You missed my point. You misunderstood my point. I couldn't be simpler. I'm not talking about like the mathematics and all that stuff being simple. I'm just saying, all my point was there's not an explicit F equals ma. It takes a different form. You guys always like to take things back to like pseudo force, right? It's a pseudo force, so there's not an A for acceleration in quotes here.
It's F equals ma.
So I'm just kind of doing what you guys do.
What's that?
Like I said, you're trying to say, well, it's a pseudo force, pseudo in quotations. I'm telling you, well, the equation, there's no A for F equals ma in quotations.
Well, there is.
So I'm just playing a little game with you here.
Yeah, you are. Why don't you stop it? It's getting very annoying.
Oh my lord! I gotta say, Anthony, your live stream yesterday about the moon not being a physical object was priceless.
Thanks. So what about that F equals ma? Is that an expressed force or not?
F equals ma is the definition of Newton's first law, how it interacts, right?
Right, and we have an accelerating mass, don't we? It moves away from vertical.
We do.
It's rotating. Right, so it must be a force.
It is. It's a pseudo force to help you understand what's going on in the situation. It's a clear distinction.
As well. It's not a theory. It's his first law. I don't see how he can pick and choose it.
He's not picking and choosing it. We're just making a direct connection here to what's happening, and we're labeling things differently to help you understand what's going on. It's not any kind of like bigger picture thing. It's just we're going to label this a pseudo force to help you understand what's happening.
You mean to change the rules again? To change the rules, to move around, to not confront with the core. That's what you're doing, isn't it? It's what you always do, all of you.
Yeah, I will tell you, like, I mean, this stuff is complicated, like inertia and momentum. Like they kind of, I'll even profess here that I don't really understand the distinction between inertia and, and momentum. I'll be intellectually honest there.
You defend the pseudo force to the end, and
well, they basically had the same definition, but it's just kind of cropped up in different places. So I'll be honest here and tell you that.
So it must be the same. That's your code, isn't it?
What you should do? My code is if it works, it works. Like you can apply this stuff in engineering, and it'll work.
Well, if it'll work, that doesn't mean that it's real. It just means it works.
What you should do, if you think you're right, is write a paper and collect your Nobel Peace Prize, because all of science thinks you're wrong.
Why would you get a Nobel Peace Prize for writing a scientific paper?
Because you'd be changing the definition of science.
A Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, you would. Yeah.
I mean, science brings all these different nations together.
You only get a Nobel Peace Prize if you commit genocide. So that's not going to happen.
Science. Jesus, Darwin, what's wrong with you and death and killing and stabbing and things? What's wrong with you lately?
Oh, well, seriously.
Yeah, seriously.
Name anyone who got a Nobel Peace Prize that didn't in their own way.
There's a difference between a Nobel Prize and a Nobel Peace Prize, by the way.
Yeah, there is. Sorry, Tony. I'll concede that. Is this broadcasting live?
It should be.
I don't think so. I can't see anything.
And Nathan's been quiet for more than 10 seconds, so it can't be.
Lord, it feels like longer than an hour. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah,
we're
not online anymore.
I think he got face on me, Tony, and quit. Is he still here?
He can't have done.
Yeah, that is hilarious. He's going to get mad because you concede that basically I didn't get the definition wrong. It's not like a knock in your favor or my favor. That's just saying, whoops.
No, I agree. Get the definition wrong, but what I'm pointing out is that there is a direct contradiction in the definition for force equals mass times acceleration, because if it is force times mass times acceleration, that is a force by definition.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying I don't understand why he's mad, because you're not really giving up any ground. You're just saying
where is this streaming? I don't get it.
I don't think it is. I think Nathan's quit.
But it's weirder. Like, I'm going to Flat Earth Debate channel, and the last video is like 6 days ago. I don't get this.
Yeah.
So he's been putting them up on his other channel.
My bad. After you explain unorthodox clearly, you run the show and understand Darwin's question.
Oh, you're still here. We thought you'd gone, Nathan.
Yeah, I try to keep saying it, but every time someone says, "Is he still here?" someone else answers on my behalf.
Rude.
We thought you'd have a hissy fit and left.
I did have a hissy
Rage
fit.
Quit your own hangout.
Yeah, I pretty much did. I ended the live stream in utter disgust with you, Anthony. So you've been sucked into this straw man, and now Alan's having a damn good laugh about it.
No, we're laughing because you're disgusted with him, Nathan. We don't understand why you're disgusted with him.
Because you not figure out why, man.
Because we spent 40 minutes discussing the contradiction of the Coriolis effect based on your example of a Foucault pendulum that is designed to demonstrate two separate reference frames. Only for you to simultaneously say that if you're in a helicopter, it's in lockstep, which is a complete contradiction. That took 40 minutes. Then, at the very end of the show, you went off on this little side tangent, so that you could get Anthony to concede to make it seem like, after zero concession from you, that you'd somehow won, which pissed me off entirely.
And that's not what we're saying at all!
Boys, before you carry on, it's been an absolute pleasure this afternoon, guys. I really enjoyed it, so take care, and I'll catch you all about.
See you later, Adam.
God bless
you. Dude.
Thanks, Adam.
Nathan, I think you're misinterpreting what happened. That's not really what happened.
Oh, so you did concede that you can't have both two reference frames and one reference frame at the same time, then? You conceded that point, did you?
No, Anthony didn't really give up any ground.
Oh, I see. So we are back on the straw man that pissed me off. So rather than conceding,
I mean, maybe I misunderstand what's
you're
going
going to
on.
talk over me as soon as I point out again that literally within seconds of me pointing out the reason I'm annoyed is because we held your hand for 40 minutes through this contradiction, only for you to offer up a straw man which Anthony bit on, and now you're still demanding concession for it. So no concession for the 40 minutes of contradiction of not one and two reference frames, only one or the other.
Coriolis effect is caused by it moving out of the one reference frame, Nathan.
Not moving out of. You have either two or one reference frame.
In lockstep, whatever.
No.
Right, the reference frame is the Earth moving, okay? Imagine, perfectly. Right? As soon as it moves in a manner that is not in perfect unison with the rotating reference frame.
Sorry, we've had this discussion.
It's out of unison.
Unorthodox. Yeah. This is the conversation I was talking about. The one that we spent 40 minutes on, that we went round and round and round in circles with reference frames. And you not conceding that you can't have both attached atmosphere and separate reference frames. So rather than concede it again, you're either going to argue it again from a position of ignorance or hold up this straw man that Anthony bit on. Because you won't concede, will you? That you can't
Nathan,
have both.
You explained my point perfectly with the Foucault pendulum. As soon as it's in its rest position, at that point it is moving with the reference frame. As soon as it moves out of the perfect position, or it's a stable position, like a pendulum, at that point it is not in lockstep with the reference frame. So it's illustrated clearly that you understand what I'm talking about here.
Now that is word salad.
Yeah, just total word salad.
Hang on.
You can't have
Right,
both.
stop.
You can't be in lockstep in a separate reference frame and then not in lockstep in a separate reference frame. You either are in separate reference frames or you're not in separate reference frames.
A reference frame is how you...
finished.
I
hadn't finished.
Hold on.
Shut up.
Let
me say one more thing. Let me say one more thing.
Why don't you stop moving the bar constantly and
I'm not moving the bar.
Concede to something.
You are moving the bar.
I just conceded to something 3 minutes ago, Arwen.
Really?
You are moving the goal.
You're moving on. You're moving it again and again and again.
Let me explain what this. It takes 60 seconds, and let me see what your take on this is. Okay, I think you guys are misunderstanding this. So the reference frame is just how you determine what position it's in. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're saying that the Foucault pendulum is in a position that's moving with the Earth. Now, when it's at its bottom point, once you swing it, we're saying that if you think of a grid, it's now moving away from the grid lines. It's not moving with the actual grid lines perfectly.
Oh, so to summarize, when the pendulum is in motion, it is in a second reference frame.
A reference frame is describing the position of the object, Nathan.
Yes, so at rest, you're saying it's attached to Earth's reference frame, moving with the single reference frame, and then when you set it in motion, it moves into a second reference frame. That's what you're saying.
You can have 1,000 reference frames, Nathan. You can make anything
Oh,
a
here we
reference
go.
frame.
Another straw man asshole argument to offer up rather than concede a point.
I can't tell if you guys misunderstand this or.
I don't misunderstand it. I'm telling you, I understand the difference between being on a reference frame that's rotating and then leaving the reference frame and causing the Coriolis effect. Now, let me think of another example that would fit into that description. A plane on the rotating reference frame, taking off and leaving that reference frame. A bit like your pendulum example, except that we don't see any deviation because the Earth doesn't rotate underneath the aeroplanes. But you would assert that the fact the Earth's turning is causing the deviation in the pendulum. That is a contradiction that we've gone over for 45, probably an hour.
You have to prove that it has nothing to do with wind, it has nothing to do with anything else.
Another straw man that he offered up earlier on the show. So Circle Jerk Asshole does the same thing he's done already. So this was where Chocolate Saiyan pointed out to you that east to west and west to east have, again, contradictory journey times. Not massively different, one taking hugely longer because you're flying in the face of Earth turn, and the other taking massively less because you're flying with Earth turn. That doesn't happen unorthodox.
So why can't the plane...
Don't ask me anything, you stupid asshole. Concede. You have a contradiction. If the Foucault pendulum demonstrates separate reference frames, then planes would take different durations.
Plane just apply the more
Just a
power.
rumpusing asshole now, aren't you? Just a rumpusing asshole. Now we're back on track.
A simple question.
Now we're back on track. You're a rumpusing asshole.
Like, you could say something like, it takes a lot
still not
more
conceding.
fuel to get from east to west or west to east because the plane has to account for the Coriolis effect. But the fact that the times are the same doesn't really matter. They could be accounting for it. They could be going faster. They could be moving in a different manner.
Well, that's just a Gish Gallop ad hoc explanation for why it doesn't happen.
I mean, that's a pretty...
it's a Gish Gallop ad hoc crap explanation for the contradiction.
I don't think so at all. I think it could be pretty...
I do. I think you saying that they might fly the plane faster, what, to keep up with the fucking Earth turning?
No, the speed is...
That's what you've just said. Your Gish Gallop word salad asserted that the planes were travelling different speeds, i.e. the pilots increased speed to keep up with Earth turn. Are you a moron? What? That is your Gish Gallop explanation for the contradiction.
I don't really understand your point here, Nathan.
The problem is the contradiction, and now you're finally starting to have it sink in and trying to give a Gish Gallop explanation.
I don't understand why they couldn't just correct for it.
You've attempted to give a Gish Gallop explanation for the contradiction now. So it's finally sunk in that there is a contradiction then, dickhead.
No, I'm not saying there isn't a contradiction. I'm saying...
Yeah, there is! If you've got two reference frames on the pendulum, then you've got two reference frames of the planes.
Count. I mean, that is what the engineering language details, right? All the engineering handbooks we have about planes and how they move.
Nathan, repeat your last sentence and listen.
If the pendulum demonstrates separate reference frames, then it applies to aeroplanes.
Yes.
So why don't they show any effect of the Earth turning underneath the plane?
Because they have a motor and they can account for it.
Oh, so when you push the pendulum, you're not inserting force into it. Bit like a motor. So, like with you with a bottle, don't talk over me. Listen, like with the bottle, you are inserting a force. And when you push the pendulum, you are inserting force. And when an engine propels the plane, it's inserting a force. So we've got a parallel. The same thing is happening. Not a helicopter, a plane, moving, with a force applied to it. Like you pushing a pendulum.
Nathan, you set the pendulum in motion and then you leave it. A plane is exerting force constantly.
And that would make the problem worse. So if you're propelling yourself faster over an Earth that's turning underneath, it's going to make the problem more obvious. You're going to have more of the effect, you bonehead.
I mean, can you just not admit that they could correct for it? Why can't they correct for it?
So we're back to the Gish Gallop ad hoc. What? So you're telling me that on the equator, they're increasing the plane's velocity by 1,000 miles an hour? You complete moron.
No, I don't know.
No, I know you don't know. You've got a Gish Gallop explanation for the contradiction that you finally understood after an entire hour.
So how much is it supposed to be off by?
Well, on the
According to
equator,
you.
1,000 miles an hour. That's how much
1,000
the Earth
miles
would
an
be
hour,
turning
yeah.
underneath the plane.
That's not the Coriolis effect. That's the spin of the...
Oh, really? So the plane leaves the first reference frame and the Earth turns underneath, and that's not the Coriolis. You stupid idiot.
You're misunderstanding this, Nathan.
No, that is the Coriolis. The ball leaves the roundabout and the roundabout turns underneath. That's Coriolis. The plane leaves the roundabout, otherwise known as a spinning ball Earth, and the Earth turns underneath.
Nathan, he just said that 1,000 miles an hour is not the Coriolis.
He's an idiot.
You're trying to equate two different things.
No, there's a reference frame that's turning. In the case of Earth, at 1,000 miles an hour. And when something leaves that reference frame, as demonstrated according to you by the Foucault pendulum, it goes into a second reference frame.
Look at my picture.
You can make 1,000 reference frames now.
We're back to this. You've used this as well on the live show, haven't you, asshole? So how many more gish gallop crap explanations do you have for this glaring contradiction?
So you're saying that 1,000 miles per hour should be the difference when you travel east to west and west to east due to the Coriolis effect?
On the equator, yeah. If the Earth turns...
Due to the Coriolis effect.
Yeah, if the Earth is turning... Yeah, if the Earth is turning underneath the aeroplane, then you have an Earth turning at 1,000 miles an hour underneath the aeroplane. If the aeroplane's also powered by a jet, that would mean it's travelling even faster than that. But according to you, the pilots are compensating for this 1,000 miles an hour difference in each direction. Right, dickhead?
That would only be if the atmosphere isn't rotating with the Earth, Nathan.
Oh, so we're back to you now not understanding the contradiction and asserting that we don't have a Coriolis effect and it's only one reference frame, so no Coriolis.
Wind, Nathan. You can...
Oh, we're now back to wind. What a wanker. So wind wouldn't change the fact that underneath your plane, you've got an Earth turning at 1,000 miles an hour. Wind's not going to compensate for that either, dick brain.
Nathan, if I'm in a train and I have a drone...
No, we're not in a train. The train is attached to the reference frame. So, we're in an aeroplane, or swinging a pendulum, or throwing a ball off a rotating reference frame into a second reference frame to have an apparent deflection called the Coriolis force, a pseudo-force that makes it appear to deviate because the roundabout turns underneath the ball, the Earth turns underneath the plane. That's it. That's what is Coriolis.
Will you answer my question?
You don't have questions.
If you're in a train cabin and you have a drone, can you fly the drone to the end of the cabin and back to you? And it takes the same amount of time to go from you to the end of the train when you're going forward 100 miles an hour, and then back to you when it's at the opposite direction of the train moving. Does it take more time for the drone to go one way or the other way in that scenario?
Are you ever going to shut up? You're going to ask your question and then jabber on indefinitely. It's in one reference frame, a closed system. Closed, therefore, one frame of reference. The air and the train travel together as one in one reference frame. Now, were you to hack the top off the train, you'd then have two reference frames, wouldn't you? Then you'd have a Coriolis effect, because you had two separate reference frames. How long do you think your drone would stay on the plane, on the train, if you cut the roof off and had a separate reference frame hurtling by at 400 miles an hour?
Make it 10 miles high, Nathan. Make the...
no, a moment ago it was 400 miles an hour. Now we've got the scale negation of 10 miles an hour for some reason. No, we're on a 400 mile per hour train. It's got no roof. Now I'm going to ask you whether or not the plane, drone, is going to fly off at 400 miles an hour and from your position on the train appear to fly off at 400 miles an hour, even though it's you on the separate reference frame that's actually moving at 400 miles an hour as you leave the drone behind in the second reference frame. precisely what the planes and Earth should be doing. The Earth turns underneath.
They're moving together, Nathan.
No. You've got a closed example with a plane in a train with all the air travelling along with it in lockstep. That's one reference frame. No Coriolis. According to you, the drone would carry on with the train. Well, that's because there's no Coriolis effect. No deviation. So what's your example proving? That we do have no Coriolis on the Earth because the atmosphere's in lockstep? Well, then you don't have a Coriolis, you muppet.
No, it seems like you're trying to misconstrue this Coriolis with like the atmosphere moving with the Earth.
The atmosphere moving with the Earth would mean no second reference frame. We're just going round and round in circles, with you trying to square the circle of needing 1 and 2 reference frames when you can only have 1 or 2 reference frames. This contradiction will never sink in because you're stupid.
You can have an infinite amount of reference frames, Nathan.
You're just muttering.
Yeah, you can have an infinite amount of reference frames, but you can't have them at the same time. It's always going to be 1 reference frame, 2 reference frame, more reference frame. 1 reference frame and 2 reference frames are never going to be the same thing. That's the point.
No, that's how you set it up. You set it up to like define your system, like my table right here.
No,
make a reference frame.
What the Coriolis effect does. It's either 1 reference frame and there's no Coriolis effect.
Okay, let's just ask him this. In your train example,
there will be Coriolis
how many reference frames do you have in your train example? 1 or 2?
Well, I'm saying that the base reference frame would be the train, and then the other stuff moves in relationship to it. So you're moving the drone at a certain speed in reference to the train cart.
So
and then there's another one when you're talking about the cart versus the ground.
Stop. Don't bring up new examples. So the drone and the train are 1 reference frame.
Once the drone starts moving, it's moving in relationship to the reference frame.
Yeah, so 1 reference frame.
Yes, sure.
So not an example that would yield a Coriolis then, dickhead.
It just seemed like you're trying to misconstrue the 1,000 miles per hour at the equator with the Coriolis effect.
Sorry,
it seems like you're trying to
I'll say it again.
Misconstrue the
Wanker. Wanker. 1 reference frame in your train example with a drone. 1. You need to have a Coriolis effect. 2 reference frames. Hello?
Well, let me ask you this. What if we do it...
Don't ask me something. You've just accused me of misconstruing the example of Coriolis with Earth turn at 1,000 miles an hour, and then you give me a plane and drone in 1 reference frame.
Nathan, I don't... We're having trouble communicating here.
Yeah, because you keep misconstruing the examples and giving us 1 when you're talking about 2, and then giving us 2 when you're talking about 1. So what you're actually doing here on Orthodox is projecting your confusion and your conflation of the 2 reference frames into 1 and 1 reference frame into 2, like I don't understand something.
Wait, so what's the difference between the train example and the Earth example?
Because there's only 1 reference frame on the train, and according to you and the Foucault pendulum, Earth has got 2 reference frames. That's probably the 10th time I've said this to you, you complete retard.
You can understand the train example by talking about 2 reference frames.
No, because it's only 1 reference frame when you put a drone inside and use your drone to explain how they're in lockstep, when trying to simultaneously give it as an example of the Coriolis effect, which has nothing to do with the drone being in lockstep, because that's the antithesis of the Coriolis effect.
No, you're talking about the train versus the ground. There's 1.
No, we're not talking about the train versus the ground, because then we're talking about the ground being a reference frame and the train being a second reference frame. That's not the example you gave. Why would you do this? It seems that you're trying to trick us.
To help you. No, Nathan. I mean, I'm not a perfect teacher here. I don't know how to explain something to you.
Well, then don't. Just shut your stupid mouth.
Okay.
Just shut your mouth then.
made some points. I'm adjusting
Yeah, you're
the way
not
I'm
a teacher.
explaining it to you
So
to help you
don't
understand
teach.
it. I'm not.
Don't teach. Sod off and don't teach because you're not very good at it. You're a moron. You don't understand the difference, and you accuse me of conflating two things when in fact it's you who are continually conflating a single reference frame, i.e. the example of a drone inside a plane, which will not deviate from the path of the train travelling at a certain speed because it's in one reference frame, and then saying that's somehow comparable to the
What about the
Earth
ground?
with a
What about the ground?
lockstep atmosphere that doesn't cause a Coriolis effect.
I can tell you the other reference frames if you let me show it to unorthodox.
I mean, you can talk about it in multiple ways.
Look, here, the equator. Once you hover with a helicopter, right, you will stay in the same reference frame. It is stationary, right? If the whole helicopter moves from left to right, from let's say from west to east, the reference frame doesn't matter in reference to the Coriolis effect. It only matters when it moves from south to north.
That's total bollocks. What an utter load of horse crap. You take off in a helicopter, and according to the Coriolis effect that you assert we have on Earth, the Earth turns underneath the helicopter.
Let me finish my explanation. Why? Because the more you go to north, the slower the Earth spins, because there is less mass to that there is how should I call it, when you have a ball and you spin it, the part on the North Pole will move slower, right, than the part on the equator. You can test it for yourself with a tennis ball, with a basketball, right? The axis will spin faster.
No.
Now you go.
While that might be true, Zinder, the effect is an apparent deviation. So if you take off in a helicopter, the helicopter is static. It's hovering. It's not travelling north. It's not travelling west. It's not travelling any direction. It's hovering. Now, from your position on the ground, it appears, because you're continuing to rotate underneath it, like it's travelling. Even though it's actually not travelling, it's only an apparent deviation. That would be the Coriolis effect. Sod all to do with whether or not it's travelling north. It's an apparent deviation caused by you on the first reference frame, the moving Earth. See the helicopter that's hovering appearing to be moving, even though it's not. It's stationary, hovering above its position while the Earth turns underneath.
No, the Coriolis effect on a sphere is different than on a plate.
No, the Coriolis effect is the Coriolis effect. It is the apparent deviation that is taken when you travel from a rotating into a non-rotating reference frame. It doesn't matter if it's a spherical or circular reference frame. If it's rotating and you go from one to the other, that is where you have a Coriolis effect, an apparent deviation because you're rotating on a reference frame that is separate to the thing that isn't attached to that reference frame. So your helicopter goes up in the air, doesn't move left, right, up, down, or any direction, and the Earth rotates underneath. The problem being that a helicopter goes up in the air, and the Earth stays in exactly the same smegging position underneath it. There is no Coriolis deviation. You don't see your position carrying on moving as the Earth turns, while the helicopter stays in the same position. That doesn't happen.
You're conflating two different things, Nathan. Hovering a helicopter would not cause the Coriolis effect.
Look, listen a moment.
Why? Why? Wait, hold on. Why not? It's in a separate reference frame. So you're saying a helicopter takes off, but it's somehow tethered with an imaginary force to the rotating reference frame underneath it. How is it being carried along if it's in a separate reference frame?
It's not. That's what he's trying to say. It's hovering. It's moving along with everything. It's attached to it.
Attached. That's the bit. Hold on, Zinder. What do you mean attached? What's attaching it? It's left the ground. It's no longer attached to the rotating reference frame. So
the
how is it
attached? Rotating with the Earth, Nathan.
How
That's
is it
what
attached?
we say.
How is it attached?
Because it's not moving in reference to the ground beneath it.
No, that just means it's not demonstrating a Coriolis effect. That doesn't mean it's tethered to the Earth.
No, I mean, it's not tethered in the sense it's a physical.
No, I know it's not tethered. And it's also not demonstrating any Coriolis effect. I'm asking you how you think it is tethered.
Because of the atmosphere, Nathan.
Oh, so the atmosphere is in lockstep with the Earth.
No, not perfection. No, not
perfect. So sometimes it's in lockstep if you hover, but then if you travel in any direction, suddenly it's not in lockstep. That's a contradiction. The same contradiction we've spent an hour and 20 minutes on.
How's that a contradiction, Nathan?
Because it's either in lockstep with the Earth or not in lockstep with the Earth.
There's wind, Nathan.
Oh, we're going to do the same circle jerk asshole routine as last time. The Earth, with wind, will not compensate from the fact that if we have a Coriolis effect at the equator, the Earth turns 1,000 miles an hour underneath anything not attached to it.
Like, if you look at any one molecule of air, you know, they're not typically moving in perfect lockstep with a rotating Earth, but it's pretty close to perfect. But once you deviate from pure perfection, you get a Coriolis effect, Nathan. Like just wind, like the heat, the difference between heat making and pressure, right? You got heat and pressure going on, causing wind.
Well, that would be the wind that caused that deviation then, wouldn't it? Not the Earth turning underneath.
I can't tell if you generally...
I can't tell. Yeah, if there's a slight deviation because of a slight amount of wind, I'm going to say that that's the wind causing that. Like a slight duration difference from east to west or west to east. With a bit of wind behind you, you'll go a bit quicker. That doesn't alter the fact that the bloody Earth is supposed to be turning underneath unorthodox at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. That would cause vast differences in these plane travels, if we're to believe they're separate reference frames, but you seem to be now asserting that they're not, and the Earth's in lockstep. The atmosphere turns with it, facilitating helicopters to be tethered.
Can I show you like a live example? Can you see my iPad screen? I've got a model here of a globe.
Why is it that you still don't see Nathan's point?
Yeah, he's just going to wank me around the entire
I think he's trying to misconstrue
He's going to wank us around for 4 hours, and then no matter what I do, no matter what I say, no matter how many times I highlight the contradiction, it won't matter. He will circle jerk us around to the original point. He will not concede. He might bring up a straw man and then demand concession for that for 20 minutes.
Can you see my screen?
No, I'm not interested in what you've got to show us.
Why? Hang on, the only reason why I was prepared to move on with that concession point is because I thought he got the Coriolis contradiction at that point because he was conceding an element to do with the centrifugal force. But I really get it.
There isn't a contradiction, Anthony. Sorry.
There is a contradiction.
Nope.
Yeah, there is. You can't have
two. You know why?
When you claim the atmosphere is solid, one reference frame. You need to do the Coriolis force, correct?
The next reference frame is the difference in speed you enter when you go north or when you go south. That's the next reference frame. When you go east or when you go from east to west, you don't enter differences in speed. You only enter them when you go from north to south or south to north. So then the reference frame you enter is a difference in speed. And every step you make north, you enter a new reference frame in terms of Earth rotation. So we have infinite reference frames. When we go from north to south, we have one reference frame. We have one reference frame when we go from east to west.
So what you're saying is, when you go east to west, the Earth has an atmosphere in lockstep with the Earth, but when you travel north from the equator, suddenly the Earth starts to rotate underneath the atmosphere. That doesn't work, Zinder. That's a contradiction again.
No.
Oh, really? Let me ask you this, Zinder. Let me just ask you a quick clarification question. So, Zinder, when you say that the difference in speed as you travel north, would that be the difference in speed of the Earth rotating underneath?
Yes, the Earth
so it's not in lockstep then, because there's a difference.
well, you will be in lockstep once you stay, or once you stay or you stop traveling north, then you will be in lockstep again.
You in your plane will not control whether or not the Earth and its atmosphere travel in lockstep. Do you not get that, Zinder? Are we going to spend 40 minutes doing the same exact thing with you as we did with the most dumb person to ever join the panel? Don't embarrass yourself, Zinder.
If the plane stays on the equator, it stays in the same reference frame. It is kinda in lockstep in terms of the Coriolis.
Zinder.
In terms of the Coriolis.
Zinder, that would mean no Coriolis effect.
No,
yes, no Coriolis effect on the helicopter.
No
Shut
Coriolis
up,
effect.
shut up, Unorthodox. I'm talking to Zinder. Zinder's saying if we travel in a plane on the equator, no Coriolis.
Yes, then there is no Coriolis when you stay on the equator. However, once you go north or once you go south, then the Coriolis starts happening because you enter a different reference frame. That means that you enter different speed.
So a different speed of what, Zinder? A different speed that the Earth turns underneath the atmosphere? That different speed, Zinder?
Yes.
Oh, so how can the Earth... Hold on, Zinder. How can it be travelling at a different speed under the atmosphere when it's simultaneously in lockstep? That's a contradiction. Second time I've pointed you out. I don't mind going through this 50 times with you, Zinder, and making you look on this recording for my biggest audience like the most stupid person who's also gone through this on the same show. So should we go through this 5 more times? 10 more times? 20 more times, while you assert that if you travel east to west on the equator, it's in lockstep, but if you suddenly deviate north, the Earth and atmosphere detach and go at different speeds? Let's hear it again, Zinder. Let's hear it.
Really
Shut up! I'm going to kick you out if you talk again, Unorthodox. I'm done with you. Let's hear Zinder talk like you, like a moron, for a few more times.
No, well, as I said, the Coriolis effect is only it only happens when you go from north to south or south to north because you enter difference of speed. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've said this is the third time.
Yeah.
Let's try a third time.
Yes.
A different speed that the atmosphere travels underneath the... Sorry. A different speed that the Earth travels underneath the atmosphere. Right, Zinder? So, as you travel north, the atmosphere has a different rotation speed of the Earth underneath it. So you're traveling into a different speed, correct?
Yes.
So you were in one speed, right, Zinder? One speed with the Earth turning underneath, and then you move into a different speed with the Earth turning underneath. Right, Zinder?
As long as you keep east-west, it doesn't matter as long as when you go north, you enter another speed. So
yeah, yes. With the Earth turning underneath at a different speed.
Yes.
So the atmosphere is traveling at a different speed when you move north, but simultaneously in lockstep. That's a contradiction. How many more times? How slow do I have to say it?
Alright, if there was no wind...
Oh, you're going to literally use an orthodoxy shit argument,
no, if
really?
If there was no wind, alright, if there was no wind, the atmosphere would be in lockstep from east to west, but when it wants to, when the air south, it isn't in lock speed anymore. Once it stays there, once it stops moving from north to south, it is in lockstep again.
So the plane, you're saying, so long as it's in perfect east to west, what happens if they make a slight turn? We get a Coriolis then, so depending on if the plane makes a slight deviation, we may or may not get Coriolis, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I calculated it, the Coriolis effect, and it is kilometers per hour every kilometer, right? So the difference in speed per kilometer, you go to north to south, is 0.16 kilometers per hour or 160 meters per hour.
Right.
That's nothing.
Zinder, so
That's
if I'm in a plane then, Zinder, and I decide that I want to make the journey go that much faster, so rather than going perfect east to west, I'll just deviate slightly, because then, according to you, the Earth will turn underneath me. It might get a slightly slower speed as I travel slightly further north, but ultimately speaking, when I do that travelling of north, the Earth is then rotating underneath the plane, correct? They're not in lockstep. Oh, right.
You won't profit from it, really, because...
So you deviate slightly north, you were travelling west, and you deviate slightly north, and suddenly you've got an extra 1,000 miles an hour speed attributable to the plane then, because the Earth is actually travelling underneath you at 999 miles an hour, because you've gone slightly north, right?
If you would go to the North Pole, let's not take 1,000 miles. Let's take 500.
No, let's take 1,000 miles an hour on the equator, as you've given as an example. You travel perfect east to west, and you're in lockstep. No Coriolis. It's perfectly tethered to the atmosphere, right? Then we deviate slightly north, and we see the speed change as the Earth rotates underneath the atmosphere. Like you said, Zinder. Right, at a different speed underneath the atmosphere. Yeah, so then we deviate. Shut up. Then we deviate slightly north, and we've got 999 miles an hour extra on top of the plane. Right, Zinder?
Well, you only have the 900. You only have the 1,000-mile extra if you travel to the North Pole, right?
Yeah, so we're travelling north, slightly
north. Once you
north.
are at the North Pole, you
that's what we're doing in the example, Zinder. You're now moving us up to the North Pole where there's very little speed because it doesn't make the example as good.
You were talking about a bonus of 1,000 miles per hour. And
that's what happens when you have a rotating reference frame underneath that travels at 1,000 miles an hour.
Look, you only get the bonus once. Let's say you could teleport, all right?
No, let's not say we can teleport. Let's say we're on a plane, travelling with an Earth rotating underneath us, in lockstep with the atmosphere attached to the Earth, and then you deviate slightly north and get this added bonus of a 999 mile an hour speed attachment because you're no longer in lockstep with the atmosphere and the Earth's rotating underneath you, according to this apparent squaring of the circle of having simultaneously both 1 and 2 reference frames, depending on which direction you travel, according to Zinder.
Look, you only get the 1,000 miles per hour bonus if you manage to travel the 10,000 kilometers that are required to go to the North Pole.
Why? When the Earth is rotating underneath you at 1,000 miles an hour and you're in a separate reference frame, the Earth is simply rotating underneath you at 1,000 miles an hour. You don't have to travel that far north, right? You just travel a little bit north into one of those speed changes where the Earth suddenly starts rotating underneath, where it wasn't before, Zinder.
No, you have to travel 10,000 kilometers.
No, we only have to travel away from perfect east to west, according to you. According to you, when you deviate from that perfect direction, suddenly we are into a zone that has the Earth travelling underneath at varying speeds. That's what you said. Yeah. So, as soon as we deviate, there's 1,000 mile an hour Earth travelling underneath the plane, Zinder.
No, there isn't.
No, I know there isn't! That's why it's a huge contradiction!
No, because you don't understand it.
Oh, it's because I don't understand, not because it's a complete contradiction, eh, wanker?
You are completely misrepresenting what
No, I'm not misrepresenting anything. If the Earth turns underneath the plane at 1,000 miles an hour, then the Earth travels underneath the plane at 1,000 miles an hour. It's that simple. Or it doesn't. And it doesn't. Right, Zinder? That doesn't happen. Right, Zinder?
The plane already... the plane on the equator... let's say it travels, I don't know, 500 miles per hour, so it goes like 1,500 miles per hour from east to west.
No, but that doesn't happen, does it? Doesn't happen, Zinder. We don't get planes that are taking 1,000, 1,500 mile an hour journeys and completing them in record time, do we?
It was an example for you to.
Yeah, we don't have that example, Cinder. That's the point. There aren't planes travelling at 1,500 miles an hour because the Earth's going underneath them at 1,000 miles an hour. That's the point. We don't have that as an example, Zinder. So you inventing it in your musings doesn't make your contradiction go away, now does it? Let's just invent a situation where plane journeys go at 1,500 miles an hour. No, that doesn't solve the problem. That's just your invention.
All right, then let me put it another way. All right, the plane standing on, like, not even being lift off, is traveling 1,000 miles per hour with the Earth's rotation. It is the reference frame to the ground is 0, but if you take the plane and the Earth as a whole, it is traveling 1,000 miles per hour. Once it lifts off and reaches a velocity of 800 miles per hour from east to west, then you could say it is traveling, let's say, 1,800 miles per hour. And when you go to north, when you fly to north,
Stop. So what you are actually now asserting is that we do have planes travelling at 1,500 miles an hour, Zinder. That's
no,
your
they
assertion.
Aren't traveling at the speed. They are.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
They can't.
So we've got planes that are travelling with the Earth turning underneath them and going at 1,500 miles an hour. So do we have the opposite effect in the opposite direction, where suddenly they're going at a snail's pace because they're going against the flow of the Earth turn? Do we have that, Zinder?
Well, they travel at, let's say,
I'll tell you the answer, Zinder. No, we don't have that. We don't have planes struggling against the Earth curve and travelling at 1,500 miles an hour, Zinder. Are you a moron? Do you really believe that we have planes struggling against the flow of the Earth turn and travelling at 15 miles an hour on the equator? Is that what you think? Ha ha ha, what an idiot.
They don't, Nathan.
Yeah, we know they don't. That's the point.
Yes, but that is not what that has nothing to do with the Coriolis.
Yeah, because we don't have a Coriolis. If we did, then they would. But we don't. That's the point. If we had a Coriolis, we'd have what you used when we got to the end of your logical extrapolation, that planes would travel at 1,500 miles an hour in one direction. But they don't, because we don't have Coriolis. It's just bollocks.
It was just as an example for you to better understand.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I better understand now that we have planes travelling at 1,500 miles an hour on the equator, because Zinder finally reached the end of the logical nonsense that is Earth-based Coriolis effect, that we do not observe and does not happen.
Well, we do observe it.
Oh, really? Show me this 1,500 mile an hour plane right now.
What do you say?
Show me the 1,500 mile an hour plane.
There aren't.
Oh, so we don't have it then. Sorry, so we don't have it. So we don't have planes demonstrating the effect of Coriolis then?
No, planes don't
Oh, really? So these planes, they're amazing. They travel into the second reference frame and are not affected. What? So they're not experiencing the Coriolis effect, Zinder?
They are, but...
Oh, so they do have the Earth turning underneath them. Show me the 1,500 mile an hour planes.
That's not what the Coriolis effect is.
Yeah, it is. The reference frame that is rotating continues to rotate underneath the second reference frame. That's what gives you it. That's what is the Coriolis effect. So if the planes aren't deviating and the ground's not travelling 1,000 miles an hour underneath them, then there is no Coriolis, Zinder.
Why is it so hard to understand that things keep their momentum?
Oh, well, if they keep their momentum, they're only in one reference frame. Like when Unorthodox had the train with a drone inside it, they keep their momentum because they're in the same reference frame. But if they are in the same reference frame, Zinder, then there's no Coriolis.
Yeah, that's why they enter the other reference frame once they go to north.
Oh, so they do enter a separate reference frame with the Earth turning underneath at 1,000 miles an hour, Zinder. Show me those 1,500 mile an hour planes then.
Again, you don't understand it.
Yeah, you said they do enter a second reference frame. So if they do enter a second reference frame and the Earth does rotate underneath at 1,000 miles an hour, show me a 1,500 mile an hour plane.
That's a stupid question because...
It is a stupid question because we don't have them. It's stupid because you don't have an answer. It's stupid because the Earth does not rotate underneath planes at 1,000 miles an hour.
You could also as well ask me, show me a unicorn, and...
Yeah, I could. Show me a unicorn because it's about as likely to be produced as Coriolis on Earth.
No.
Yeah, it's not happening, Zinder. Yeah, you're asking me to show you a unicorn because you're saying, well, I can't show you a plane going at 1,500 miles an hour. It's like asking for a unicorn for you to get me to show you a plane that exhibits the Coriolis effect, because it doesn't. The planes don't exhibit Coriolis effect, and that's our point.
They do, but you completely...
Oh, they do? Show me a 1,500 mile an hour plane with the Earth turning underneath it in a separate reference frame. Show me it. How many times are we going to do this, Cinder, you bonehead?
Until you might understand...
Well, if we've got a Coriolis effect, we've got an Earth turning underneath the atmosphere. At the equator, that would be at 1,000 miles an hour, which, as you rightly pointed out earlier, would necessitate planes travelling at the speed that they do with the Earth turning underneath them, Zinder.
So the plane flies over the Earth with, let's say, the plane in relation to the ground is 500 miles per hour. The Earth spins at 1,000 miles per hour. So both the plane and the Earth, let's say, the plane goes in the, let's say, east direction with 1,500 miles per hour if you take the Earth and the plane as a whole.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, that's what you said
only
before,
if you
Zinder.
take them as a
Yes. That's exactly what you said. Now you've repeated it. So, according to Zinder, to clarify for the audience, we have a plane taking off, going 500 miles an hour. We have the Earth turning underneath at 1,000 miles an hour. So a combined speed of 1,500 miles per hour. Show it me.
If the plane was a part of the Earth, it would rotate at 15,000 miles per hour. But I can't show it to you because we are standing on Earth. That would be on the equator at 1,000 miles per hour. So we only see the different speed of 500 miles per hour.
Sorry, we would have a combined speed though, wouldn't we? If the Earth turns underneath, it's rotating as the Earth travels underneath the plane. So you'd have a combined ground speed of the ground travelling underneath and the plane with its propulsion of 1,500 miles an hour at the equator, getting less and less as we go north. Now, that is what we would have if we had a Coriolis effect. I'm now asking you to show me any plane at any latitude that has a deviation because Earth's turning underneath it.
So, when you're standing on Earth and look at the plane, you
not when I'm standing on Earth. Not when I'm standing on Earth. Listen to the question, Zinder. Zinder, listen to the question. Show me a plane that has its velocity combined with the separate Earth turning underneath it. The combined speed of two. Any example. Show me one.
In order to show it to you, we would have to leave Earth and stop rotating.
No. In order to show it me, you'd need to show me a journey that took a very short period of time because the combined airspeed was 1,500 miles an hour. I don't need anything. I just need to see someone getting on a plane and getting off a very, very short time later because they've travelled at 1,500 miles an hour, Zinder.
No, that's not what I said.
Yeah, that's what Coriolis requires. I don't give a crap what you've said. That's what would be necessitated if the Earth is travelling underneath the plane at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, or any speed you choose to give me an example thereof. You would have a combined airspeed of whatever the Earth turns at with whatever the plane is travelling at. So I'd like one example of that.
So you can't observe the plane travelling at 1,500 miles per hour.
Oh, well, that's a shame, because that would imply that there is no Coriolis effect, Zinder.
Earth.
That would imply there's no Coriolis.
No, that's not what Coriolis says.
Yeah, it does. So The plane takes off and goes into a separate reference frame, and the Earth turns underneath. The ball you throw from the roundabout goes into a separate reference frame, and the roundabout turns underneath. If the plane is going into a separate reference frame, i.e. we have Coriolis effect, then we have a combined speed of 1500 miles an hour at the equator. The problem being there are no demonstrations of this whatsoever. It doesn't happen. Therefore, the planes do not exhibit the Coriolis effect.
So guys, I'm gonna go.
Are we still here?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the silence from Zinder while his cognitive processing kicks in. He's literally arguing for 1500-mile-an-hour planes at the moment, Anthony. It's great.
I know, I'm listening. I'm just wondering why. I don't understand how neither of them are getting it. Is it the case that they have to obfuscate this point?
What's the 1500 miles per hour in reference to?
If you've
right,
got
whenever you
separate
talk about
reference
speed, you have to talk about.
Yeah, you asked a question, then
I'm
carried
at
on
0 miles
talking.
per hour
You
in
do
reference
this a
to the
lot.
car outside
You asked a
60 miles
question,
per hour.
then carried
So
on
what are the two
talking. Are
reference
you asking
positions here,
and
then?
answering unorthodox? So you asked a question and then carried on talking. The reference to 1500...
Yeah, I illustrated it with an example.
Yeah, you're doing it again. I'll answer your question if you'll shut your stupid pie hole. The reference to 1500 miles an hour is what would be necessitated if you have Coriolis effect on Earth.
You don't answer my question.
Oh, he's still talking.
You don't answer my question.
Oh, he's still talking.
What are the
He's
two
still talking. He's asked a
locations?
question, but now he's answering it. That's what stupid people do. Well, does
What are
this
the two
work? Does it
objects
work
or
like this?
two
I'll talk
things we're talking
non-stop
about here?
and tell you how it works whilst asking because I don't know. Yeah, I'll tell you. If you've got two reference frames, then the Earth is turning underneath. That's one reference frame, Earth turning. Separate reference frame,
1,000
not
miles per hour,
turning.
right?
Oh, he's
1,000
still
miles per hour.
fucking going. Have you got a mental malfunction?
You said the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, so there's your frame, okay?
Yeah, and if you're attached to it,
Go ahead.
you travel with that reference frame at 1,000 miles an hour until you leave that reference frame. And when you leave that reference frame, you get an apparent deflection because you're rotating and the thing that's left that reference frame is no longer attached to the first reference frame. It's in the second reference frame. That's what gives you Coriolis effect. So,
I don't understand how
Shut
you
up!
get 1,500 miles per hour.
Right, this is your last chance. You're pissing me off so much I'm going to kick you out. I haven't finished talking. So, if you've got two reference frames, in order to facilitate there being any Coriolis effect, an apparent deflection as you leave one reference frame and go into another reference frame, then in that description, with an aeroplane, it's travelling with the Earth when it's attached at 1,000 miles an hour. And when it leaves that 1,000 miles an hour reference frame, you, on the spinning reference frame beneath, see an apparent deflection. You see the plane moving at a greater velocity because it's no longer attached. That's the Coriolis effect. Now, if you're to assert that we don't see that effect of the ground travelling at 1,000 miles an hour underneath the plane as it leaves the first reference frame, then we don't exhibit any Coriolis. So if we don't see it in the planes, there isn't a Coriolis effect. There is no Earth turning underneath it at 1,000 miles an hour. And if you're going to say there is a Coriolis, you need to show me that plane travelling at 1,500 miles an hour.
So you still haven't answered my question, Nathan. What are the two objects we're talking about? Where do you get 1,500 miles an hour from? So I can tell you.
You asked it again. Now shut up and
finish.
listen to the answer. How difficult is this? You ask a question. There's two things.
Traveling
a plane.
at 60.
Oh,
was
still
one sentence.
talking.
You got
That's your
one
last
sentence.
chance, wanker. Get out. You just literally
sentence,
have got
Nathan.
verbal diarrhea every time you ask a question. You ask something, then you get an answer. You don't ask and then continue to assert nonsense over the top of me while I try and attempt to answer it. If you've got a plane leaving the first reference frame, that's what's needed to have a Coriolis effect, then it's leaving a reference frame that continues to rotate underneath at 1,000 miles an hour on the equator. So by virtue of the plane continuing at its speed and the Earth turning underneath, you've got a combined speed of 1,500 miles an hour. The net effect, massively decreased air time travel. Do we see this? No. Does the plane have the Earth turning underneath at 1,000 miles an hour? No. Well, if it's not, we don't have Coriolis effect.
This is where ballers comment. Ballers comment.
Aimed at Zinder.
I know, I'm waiting for him to respond. I honestly thought Zinder got this, and I thought Unorthodox got it ages ago.
That's the response.
Is that concession by way of silence and omission?
Pound says he'll come back and claim he wasn't by the microphone or by the speakers when I was giving the explanation. Oh, I wasn't listening. I happened to be away at the most crucial moment when I should be conceding. Can you explain it again? And then he'll say, the wind causes it. They're attached reference frames. one reference frame, no Coriolis. What you got in your bag, Zinder?
I think this is the point where he realizes. I think he is there.
There, he's on mute. He's not on mute, sorry.
I heard Zinder say that he had to go do something and that he would be back, but that was a while ago.
Earth Flattener. Quantum Eraser said check your Skype. He's trying to contact you.
Okay.
Well, now we're into administrative type things. I think that's probably my opportunity to round out the after show. So with that, I will say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible, and of course a massive thank you to all of the audience in Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley, depending on which time you watch it. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!